to the region. You can see there that about two-thirds, actually more than two-thirds of the gas that we consume in the Pacific Northwest comes from Canada, Alberta, and especially British Columbia, that northeast British Columbia, which, by the way, that Montney Shale up there is one of the world's largest deposits of natural gas. So this slide just demonstrates that we have supply optionality. A third of our gas comes from the U.S. Rocky Mountain West, two-thirds from Canada, and it varies a little bit. The shares vary from each of those supply basins based on the prices and access to them. So where the prices are least expensive, the shippers on these systems will maximize the amount of gas that they can get through the system from those lower cost areas. And so that's why you see those shifts in sources of supply. I wanted to just give you that. A little bit about the numbers here in Washington State. We serve our member companies, which are Avista, Cascade, Puget Sound Energy, and Northwest Natural, serve about 1.3 million households and over 110,000 businesses, institutions, and industries. They do that through almost 47,000 miles of pipeline infrastructure that serves the region. You can see the rest of it there. I did want to talk a little bit about system attributes and kind of do a really quick comparison of the natural gas system to the grid. It's an important thing for folks to understand where they're similar, what the attributes are, where they're different. And so I start by saying, what does natural gas deliver? At the end of the day, it delivers heat for space heat, for water heat, process heat, even for, think of a lumber mill or a pulp and paper type plant, industrial, or even steel, those kinds of things. It delivers heat. It delivers fuel to drive engines, think compressors, stations, or generating turbines. It also, in some cases, provides feedstock for other products that it may produce. The electrical grid delivers electricity, which also does a lot of those things. But the natural gas system kind of has this specific attribute of, at the end of the day, it delivers heat, really, and fuel. Feedstock's a small part of it. Um, the systems operate dramatically differently. So the grid is a synchronous system, meaning everything operates at the same time. So that's a long way of saying, or a fancy word for saying that electrons move basically instantaneously across the system. The grid, the electric grid, operates at a frequency. It doesn't operate at a speed. So it's not linear, it's synchronous. The gas system, on the other hand, is a pneumatic system. It's gas under pressure being shipped in a direction. And those molecules, as opposed to electrons, those molecules move at about 25 miles an hour. And if we go back to that first slide I showed, and you think about where those molecules are coming from, we can go back there really quickly. They're coming from hundreds of miles away from where they're being consumed. So if they move at about 25 miles an hour, and I say it, those molecules slow down a little bit when they're going uphill, and they speed up a little bit when they're going downhill. But they have a long way to go, and they travel at a distinct speed. So that's two really dramatic differences between how these two systems operate, and really drive the need for closer collaboration that we'll talk more about later. There is, in the electrical grid, there is no, because it's a synchronous system, there's no way to store electricity inherently. There are external appliances, if you want to call them that, batteries, battery electric storage, and other kinds of storage attributes that can be added to the grid, but the grid itself has no inherent storage. The pipeline system, on the other hand, does have inherent storage. Because the molecules can be packed closer together or drafted. So if a shipper on the system doesn't need the gas that it nominated on the pipeline, that means those molecules are going to stay in there, which means it gets packed up a little bit. If they need more molecules on an hour of a day, then maybe they nominated, then it's drafting off that system. So there is this inherent storage in the pipeline system, packing and drafting where molecules can be compressed or expanded, drafted on to provide need in the moment. When outages occur, this is really an important consideration. Typically, on the gas system, an outage will occur really more locally, and I'm thinking more sort of at the town level. If there is an outage, or regional, if something goes bump in the night, in the grid can happen at a more micro level than that. And I'm not talking about on the gas side if a house happens to have a leak and it gets shut down, but I'm really talking about system outages that occur. So on the grid, it can be happen at a neighborhood level as well as local as well as regional. The key difference here is a neighborhood on the grid can be restored altogether. But once there's an outage at a neighborhood or locality on the gas system, the way that gas service is restored, and we can look to, I think it was December of 2023 when there was an external damage to a pipeline in eastern Washington that served Avista's customers, was shut down very quickly, but 36,000 customers were without gas. Service technicians had to go in and turn off the meters at every one of those 36,000 homes until and businesses until the service was restored or the pipeline system was repressurized, at which point technicians had to go back in and door by door turn those systems back on once the system was restored. So while typically a grid outage, something neighborhood, local, or regional, can be restored in bulk, it's very much a retail door-to-door operation on the gas side. So that's a big consideration. I want to shift gears now and talk a little bit about how we use the gas system. And this is, again, our entire region, Idaho, Oregon, Washington, and British Columbia. And you can see here the bottom green is residential, the blue is commercial, maroon is industrial, and then the yellow is gas to generate electricity. That orange line across the top represents the amount of electricity consumed in the region. It comports basically with the first three parts of the columns, the green, blue, and maroon. It's energy used, right, directly. The yellow part of these columns references the fuel used to generate electricity. So the shorthand of this particular slide is about a little less than 55% of the energy we use in the region comes from the grid on an average annual basis, and about a little more than 45% comes from the gas system, again, on an average annual basis. And then there's a tranche of gas that generates the electricity that we do consume in the region. This is, of course, excluding transportation energy. How we use the pipeline system has changed. Now, these pie charts here are relative in size. So in 25 years ago, half of the load being served in the region by the pipeline systems was industrial load. That's load that's served every day of the year, regardless. It's not really variable according to the weather. It is just a load that's being served. And that was about half of it. And the other half was what you would refer to as residential load, or I'm sorry, weather dependent load, residential, commercial, and the fuel needed to generate some electricity. All of those are really dependent on the weather, one way or another. You can see, fast forward 25 years, those pipeline systems are delivering 30% more gas than we did 25 years ago, and 75% of that is a weather dependent load. So what that means is we're using a lot more gas during winter months and summer months, less gas a year round, and on weather non-dependent loads. So We haven't expanded the pipeline system materially to serve this additional 30%. Been a recent expansion, a couple proposals, but this is a real change in how we use the pipeline system in the region here. Going forward, if I come back to this slide here, you can see really the trend line in the gas to fuel generation in the region. And then I just fast forward, we're honing in on that. What is the demand for gas to generate electricity in our region? You can see over the last 20 years, it's growing and growing pretty dramatically. You might ask the question, well, what happened in 2011, 2012? Good question. First of all, it's important to understand that as a generation fuel, gas-fired generation is the marginal resource in the region. And all that means is it's the last one on when all of the other resources are able to be producing. So think hydro, wind, solar, nuclear, everything else. When that's tapped out, then gas comes to the fore and weighs in. And conversely, when those resources are now sufficient to meet demand, gas is the first off the system. So what happened in 2011, 2012? Well, many of you may remember those were both very windy, very watery years. In fact, I think it was 2011 where BPA curtailed wind production on its system, ended up in litigation over that, but it was very windy and watery, so they didn't need as much gas-fired generation. And you see in more recent years, we've been retiring some of the baseload legislation or generation as we drive toward decarbonizing our fuel mix in the region. And you can see, especially the last 5 or 6 years, there's been pretty dramatic growth in the demand for natural gas to generate electricity in the region.
Hey, Dan, just real quick. We have a question here in the room, if we can pause for a second.
Yes.
Thank you, Dan. I've wondered about the geographic area that this is covering. Is it, well, let me just ask you what the geographic area is represented here.
I assume that's Glenn. I think I recognize your voice there, Glenn.
It's Glenn. Thank you.
Yeah, you bet. This is Idaho, Oregon, Washington, and British Columbia. But I'll say that there's very little gas-fired generation in British Columbia. It happens a little bit during the winter months, a little bit during the summer months, but it's really mostly Washington and Oregon generation and some Idaho.
And then, so I appreciate that. I had wondered about the reference to Canada there. Since 2020, do you have a sense of how much of the increase in natural gas power generation would be attributed to the reduced operation of the coal plants, the coal strip in Montana and Centralia in Washington?
Well, I'm spitballing, but that's my guess. It's the primary driver behind that increased demand for gas, because gas is a dispatchable fuel. And as the region has retired those baseload coal resources, something needs to fill the gap, and that has been gas. So I mean, I'm spitballing a little bit here, but I'd say anecdotally, I'd say that is the primary driver between the increased need for natural gas to fuel some electricity.
Okay, thank you.
Not to go too far down the line of spitballing, but I had sort of the same question on the previous slide on the pie charts. I think you had mentioned that 75% of gas is weather dependent, and I'm adding that up. That includes the generation, but
Correct.
It seems there is a bit of a shift towards more of a base load gas system that may not be as weather dependent. So just wonder what your thoughts are there.
Yeah, well, this is historic loads, and so it's really hard to say. I think what we're seeing in our forecasts, which I don't think I included forecasts in here, maybe I should have. I'm sorry if I didn't. In our forecast, we saw a little bit of growth in gas-fired generation demand for natural gas to generate electricity. A little bit of growth for the first 4 years of the outlook. Our outlook is a 10-year outlook. The last one we produced was in 24. So we're talking, the 24, 25 year through the next 4 years. There was a little bit of growth, and then it tails off a little bit after that. I just have the fresh data. We haven't published it yet from the outlook we'll publish in Q1 of 26. But that looks like it's going to actually tail off a little bit for a year or two and then jump up, just to kind of increase a little bit for a year or two and then decrease again. So it's hard to say how much of that is actually base load and how much of that is actually just trying to firm up or be that marginal resource in the region. I think it is safe to say that solar and wind power are an economic resource. There's no marginal cost to bringing them online. So when they can be generating, they are generating. And but when they're not, and we still need power, it's going to be gas that comes in to back that up. So I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, that's a lot of words to say. I just don't really know how much of this is base load and how much of this is firming.
I appreciate that. I also don't want to let go of the opportunity to point out that sometimes statistics are wild. And this one, you have 30% growth over a 25-year period, and residential and commercial stay exactly the same percentage. I thought that was a very interesting insight of a linear growth rate of those two classes.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it says, they've grown over that 25-year period of time. The load itself has grown about 30%, right? So the residential load, but it's as a proportion of the whole, it's stayed at the same. Yeah, to your point. Okay, let's see. All right, I did want to talk about this. As I mentioned in the opening, what the gas system predominantly delivers, in addition to fuel to generate electricity, it delivers heat. It delivers the heat to heat space and water in our region. And so it is a winter peaking system. And this slide just demonstrates on the last, a really kind of longer duration, real pretty significant cold snap that we had in the region, which was the Martin Luther King weekend of 2024. This measures 1 hour, but these proportions don't really change much over a day. They're about the same. But you can see that natural gas delivered for end uses, that's heat and water heat, compared to electricity, again, for end uses, this is electricity delivered to consumers. Natural gas made up 70% of that load during that 1 hour. And again, the proportions don't change much on the day. Maybe it's 65-35 for an average day. But the gas system also delivered a big tranche of gas to generate some of that electricity that was being consumed. Now we can probably it's hard to actually put this in the chart because we want to be clear that, it's hard to say where the electrons that were generated actually went. But on a day like this, where it was really cold, we could be relatively comfortable with the thought that most of those electrons probably stayed home. So it's probably another 5% of that total load was gas-fired electric generation. So 75%, 25% on this 1 hour, but really just straight deliveries, natural gas for end use, electricity for end use, 70%, 30%. Important slide to keep in mind here. And that's the overview I have for you, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
We are, unless there are clarifying questions from our bench. Okay. Thank you so much, Dan. We will now move to a connected presentation from the Western Electricity Coordinating Council and North American Electric Reliability Corporation. And give me a moment while I pull up those slides. Okay, we will hand it over to Matt from WEC.
Hey, thank you, Heather. First and foremost, thank you to the WTC for giving us the opportunity to present today. The Northwest Gas Association, they're going to be a tough act for me to follow. Dan, I found your presentation incredibly insightful. So I'll do my best to kind of keep this train rolling and match your energy if I can. But that being said, my name is Matt Zapataki. I'm a Senior Reliability Assessments Engineer at WEC. I'm here to discuss the winter reliability assessment that NERC puts out and the electric gas coordination efforts in the West. Alongside me, well, not physically, but in the room, I think with you all, is Jared Freeman from NERC, who is also a senior engineer who specializes in reliability assessments, and he'll be covering a little bit more details on NERC's winter reliability assessment. So if we go to the next slide here, this is just a brief overview of what I plan to cover today. We can skip right over that and get into it. So if we go on to the next slide, yep, perfect. I'll just provide a brief overview of WEC. I think the vast majority of folks here are pretty familiar with the organization, but this will just be a brief overview. It's one of the 6 regional entities that make up the Greater Electric Reliability Organization, or ERO. NERC provides industry-wide perspective and oversight of the ERO itself, whereas regional entities focus on the needs of the constituents residing in their area. WEC's mission is to identify and mitigate risk to reliability across the Western Interconnection, while also facilitating adherence to NERC reliability standards. So a lot of times in this presentation, I'll be referring to the northwest portion of the Western Interconnection, and that spans from Oregon, Washington, Northern Idaho, and Montana. It's kind of that medium blue area on that map there to the left. So if we go to the next slide, I'll preface today's conversation with this chart here. So above is an interconnection-wide view of the top reliability concerns stated by WEC members. Extreme heat and cold events were both cited by close to 60% of WEC members as their primary reliability concern. And the one after that was wildfires, which came in at about half of WEC members. But since winter is here, so to speak, we thought it'd be prudent to focus on winter reliability risks and to the extent we can, focus on the Northwest. So going on to the next slide here. Extreme cold, it's primarily a concern amongst WEC members in the Northwest and Canadian subregions of WEC. And looking at the seasonal temperature outlook shown on the right, that'll continue to be the case this year as well. This is understandable as these regions of the Western Interconnection tend to be winter peaking, and prolonged cold weather events can result in sustained periods of significantly elevated demand. To compound this concern, wind turbines can be susceptible to icing and overspeed during winter storms, which can significantly limit their output. Most wind turbines also cut out at a certain cold weather temperature, somewhere between 0 and -10. Solar availability during winter events tends to be extremely limited and may be reduced to 0, further straining the system. Wellhead freeze-offs can limit the supply of natural gas available to generators, and other snow or cold-related issues can, of course, damage equipment, derating natural gas sites. Natural gas storage facilities are also not immune to extreme cold weather events or winter storms. We saw this last year, I think, with Jackson Prairie. They can have equipment issues which may disrupt the ability to withdraw. Damaged transmission lines or other additional unplanned thermal outages can lead to minimal availability of market power if the event is widespread. And that was an issue that was experienced during winter storms Jerry and Heather. So if we move on to the next slide here. So given that extreme weather is increasing in frequency and intensity, last year WEC performed an assessment to highlight how prolonged extreme cold weather events might affect the reliability of the Western Interconnection in the future. So to do this, what we did is we took data and characteristics from Winter Storm Elliott, which occurred the week of December 18th back in 2022, and applied them to the same week in our 2032 production cost model. And really, this really just means we replicated the incremental load and shape of Winter Storm Elliott in 2032 and captured the extreme cold impacts we mentioned on the previous slide and that are listed above here. The natural gas derates in the study were varied from 15% to 25% and 35%, to understand the extent at which resource adequacy in the West is dependent on natural gas resources during extreme cold. All scenarios of natural gas D-rates showed a little bit of unserved energy at the least, and in some circumstances quite a bit. We can see that here on the map to the right. However, Alberta was the only area showing loss of load in the 15% natural gas D-rate scenario. In the 25% and 35% scenarios, the Alberta and the Northwest had the lion's share of unserved energy. So for Alberta, I'll just briefly cover, and then I'll try to focus on the Northwest. Alberta's resource portfolio is about somewhere between 50 to 60% natural gas and 30% solar and wind. So you could imagine a drastic reduction in the output of those resources is going to lead to unserved energy. For the Northwest, if you look at that map to the bottom there, the model demand increase was greatest in the Northwest, as this was the region of the Western Interconnection, which experienced the greatest temperature anomaly during Winter Storm Elliott. So that deep purple there indicates that it was about 12 degrees below what might be typical at that time of year. The significant demand increase coupled with the 25% and 35% natural gas D-rate percentages, or reductions, I should say, coupled with the wind reduction that I think we discussed up there, yeah, historic lows for wind and solar output. So coupled with those historic lows for wind, results in this area having the second greatest amount of EUE in the study. So what the study indicates is that with the resource plans that were submitted last year, so not with the ones we received this year, but last year, natural gas resources are still crucial in maintaining resource adequacy during extreme cold conditions, and that appears to be the case about 10 years out as well. A year 20 version of this study was also completed. I won't cover that due to time constraints, but the results trended in a similar manner. And if you'd like to review them yourself, there's a link down here to the right on the slide. I think these are going to be posted publicly, so you're all welcome to take a look at those. So moving on to the next slide, given the findings of that 2032 cold weather study and the recent events from January 2024, WEC asked for information from their members on what, if any, steps are being taken to consider the gas system in long-term planning studies. An initial yes or no poll asking about this indicates that just under 60% of WEC members consider aspects of the gas system in their electric long-term planning studies. The interconnection-wide poll results, that same percentage, I should say those same percentages hold true when we just polled the Northwest WEC members as well. So that being said, what aspects of the gas system did WEC members state they incorporated in their long-term planning efforts? Well, most of those that answered yes to the poll indicated that they attempt to integrate pipeline constraints, such as future maintenance or historic limitations that may have diminished supply in the past. Some members have noted the use of resource planning models to examine forecasted gas usage in comparison to their firm contract rights. And if there's a shortfall of gas anticipated, they proceed to examine purchase options to remedy the shortfall. Utilities with an LDC or local distribution company branch have noted that they model peak day needs for both generation and heating together to determine future contract needs. When we look at the operations horizon, many WEC members participate in mutual assistance agreements, such as the Northwest Mutual Assistance Agreement. These agreements are a collaborative effort amongst entities to assist each other in mitigating disruptions to the natural gas supply system and to assist in restoration of the gas system as requested. Provisions under these agreements can take the form of materials, personnel, supplies, or equipment. WEC members also mentioned that gas suppliers and system operators touch base daily on pipeline constraints, pricing, supply, and storage, allowing system operators to redispatch the resource portfolio as necessary to manage fuel consumption. Simulated extreme cold weather scenarios and drills are performed by members to ready themselves for operations during winter storms. In addition to this, and as shown on the right, in fuel supply emergencies, about half of WEC members can achieve at least some level of generation by switching to fuel oil at gas sites. But what's also shown on that chart is there's actually quite a bit of members that can't achieve any capacity from their natural gas sites with a secondary fuel source, which could be a bit disconcerting there, a little concerning. So, but lastly, RC West has a working group known as the Real-Time Working Group, or RTWG, and that's when members of RC West and gas affiliates convene prior to extreme cold weather events just to prepare for operational challenges that may be experienced. And if we move along to my last slide I have before we switch over to NERC,
Hey, Matt, real quick, if you can
Yes.
slide back to that last slide.
Sure.
I keyed in on this question. Seems like a survey of the pie chart in the upper right-hand corner here. Is it being considered in long-term studies? I'll just say that might be a great question to ask annually, or so we can kind of see the rate of change there, because the 60%, I appreciate those 60%, but when I think about the importance of coordination here, that I'd like to see that number be more like 100% at some point. So just interested in WEC's thoughts on doing that on a, I don't know, biannual or annual basis, so we can kind of see a rate of change there.
Yep. So we do plan to do that. So that question came out of our loads and resources narrative. So every year we put out a loads and resources data request to get all of the new resource assumptions for modeling and demand forecasts and what have you. And we added a narrative component to that where we ask a bit more in-depth questions like such as this about things like electric gas coordination, demand side management, just other more in-depth questions that get the story behind the data, if you will. So this was the first year that we had this question in there. So we do want to continue to track this over time, because we agree with you, you know, as NWGA was talking about in the last presentation, this is becoming more and more important. We saw that share of natural gas that's going to electric generation increasing over time. So this isn't going anywhere. We need to ensure that these two systems can coordinate. So yeah, so here I'm going to pivot away from gas electric coordination to the winter reliability assessment. I'll cover some of the basics, then I'll pass it over to Jared for a more detailed discussion. It should be noted that this information is preliminary and that the published date for this year's winter reliability assessment is November 13th. But each year, NERC publishes a winter reliability assessment, which leverages data provided by the regional entities to identify, assess, and report on areas of concern for the upcoming winter season. And that winter season spans from December through February. This assessment is probabilistic in nature in that all hours of the winter are examined for resource adequacy risk, with a deterministic component that centers around the peak demand hour for each assessment area. For today's discussion, Jerry and I will be focusing on the Northwest, and I'll be discussing items used for the peak hour analysis. So forecasted demand in the winter reliability assessment at the peak hour for the upcoming winter is examined at the 50th and 90th percentiles, and resource availability for that hour is looked at the 50th and 10th percentiles, and those are to represent both typical and extreme conditions. The winter reliability assessment only includes existing resources, plus any resources that WEC members deem as Tier 1 resources. These are essentially under construction resources that are anticipated to be operable within the winter reliability assessment timeframe. So if we look at the chart to the right, we see that the Northwest resource portfolio has increased this year by about 10 gigawatts, almost all of which is wind, solar, and batteries. However, an important point to note is that the nameplate capacity is not the amount of energy available at the peak hour. The anticipated available energy to serve load at the peak hour is shown on the chart to the right for both 2024 and 2025. The anticipated energy at peak reflects the 50th percentile of resource availability at the peak hour and accounts for imports and typical outages. That tan dot below the anticipated energy dot in 2025 represents the 10th percentile of resource availability, which is representative of additional derates and outages that might be experienced due to extreme cold weather. If we shift our attention to the chart to the left, I've provided the historic winter peaks for 2021 through 2024. And then for 2025, which has this kind of dot-shaped pattern, I provided the 50th percentile forecasted peak, which is in blue and is about 34 gigawatts. And the potential incremental demand for extreme cold weather is shown in yellow. And that extreme cold weather adds about 3 gigawatts of demand. This brings the 90th percentile demand forecast up to about 37 gigawatts. And I'll stop here with that cliffhanger because I want to pass it over to Jared to discuss how all this information gets incorporated into the winter reliability assessment.
Thank you so much. We are running about 10, 11 minutes behind, but that's okay. We can always save questions and comments for after the next panel and maybe eat into break a little bit, but just so our bench is aware of that. And we will hand it over to Jared.
Oh, great. Thank you much. I'll try to be brief so we don't eat all the Q&A and discussion. Thanks, Matt, for that warm up, and thank you to WEC, Mr. Chair, and the Commission, and to Commerce for inviting me to speak at this event. My name is Jared Freeman. I'm a senior engineer on the reliability assessment team at NERC. I came to NERC a little bit over a year ago after spending time working in the natural gas distribution industry, and then conducting and leading applied research in natural gas and electric system resilience for almost a decade at Carnegie Mellon and then Pacific Northwest National Laboratory. So I'm here to speak about how NERC takes all of that great work, stands on the shoulders of giants from folks like Matt's team, and then uses it to create the winter reliability assessment, which paints the big picture when it comes to power grid reliability across North America for the upcoming winter. So I'm going to show you, just like Matt did, a couple of near final pre-publication drafts and insights. They'll be available in NERC's Winter Reliability Assessment Report, which is scheduled to be released sometime in the next few weeks. I think Matt mentioned that. Next slide. So NERC and the regions work with industry stakeholders to conduct a two-part winter reliability assessment, a deterministic scenario-based capacity risk assessment, and a probabilistic energy assessment of all risk hours. NERC's assessments provide 3 risk levels: high, elevated, and normal. Risk level determinations are triggered if an area meets either the deterministic or probabilistic criteria in this table. So for the winter assessment, NERC defines high risk as there being an indication of insufficient operating reserves or energy shortfalls on the BPS during normal winter peak conditions. Elevated risk is when there's an indication of insufficient operating reserves in above normal demand situations or below normal resource availability conditions. And normal risk is when neither of those other criteria are met. So you can see the numerical thresholds here on this. I'm not going to go into the probabilistic modeling for sake of time on the far right column, but I'm just going to note here that the thresholds can be triggered either by shortfall magnitude or duration. Next slide, please. So this year, as Matt alluded to, WEC Northwest's risk designation was based on its deterministic risk period analysis, specifically the low resource scenario. So Matt spoke about the inputs that go into this scenario. So I'm going to step through how those inputs come together to show us which situations might lead to a capacity shortfall. So moving from the left to the right on this waterfall chart, we start by stacking up the anticipated on-peak capacity at power plants in the Northwest. Then we subtract the typical hourly winter peak force outages for generators in the region. And then we subtract even more outages for that low resource scenario that represent thermal plants, wind, solar, and hydro dropping to a lower point on their availability curves. We then compare that combined low resource scenario to the normal peak demand and see that diminished resources fall below the normal peak demand plus the needed operating reserves in the low resource scenario, which is one of those NERC criteria for elevated risk for insufficient operating reserves for this coming winter. One thing to note about this is that this scenario does not include non-firm assistance from neighbors, this waterfall here. So in a pinch, right, the Northwest might be able to rely on its neighbors for help so long as those neighbors aren't experiencing their own issues in winter. So with that, next slide, please. So when we complete our modeling and deterministic scenarios for all 23 regions that NERC assesses, we put them all together on this risk map that y'all are probably familiar with. So this coming winter, what we see is that multiple regions are facing elevated risks of reserve or energy shortfalls. The specific areas that pop up on this map are really important for our region, given the insights from the last slide. So in the case of a wide area event, right, that might affect both the basin area and the Pacific Northwest, resource shortages in basin might actually make it unable to provide transfers of electricity to us during that period. So it's something to keep in mind. Some other notable themes from across the continent include load growth from data centers and electrification driving potential reserve shortages in Texas and the Southwest during above normal conditions, and continuing elevated concerns about gas infrastructure constraints in the Northeast. Next slide, please. So NERC actually also collects seasonal gas-electric interdependence information from all of our areas as well. This year, multiple areas indicated that extended cold snaps could make them vulnerable given their growing dependence on natural gas to balance the grid in their areas. This season, there's also been an extra focus in our survey responses on situational awareness and increased coordination and mitigations that are being put in place and adopted since Winter Storms Elliott and Uri. A few highlights that were mentioned across the continent are increased gas industry participation and electric planning and coordinating organizations, enhanced winterization and inspection efforts, and fuel supply diversification and energy storage deployments. Matt hit on a number of those themes in his regional look. Next slide, please. And with that, I'd like to thank you again for your time and the opportunity to present NERC's work. More insights into winter readiness will be available in NERC's winter reliability assessment that is set to be released in the coming weeks just ahead of winter season. Thank you.
We have about 5 minutes for questions from anyone. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you both for your presentation. So the Pacific Northwest elevated risk in this winter season looked like what, and you explained why Texas and the Northeast. Is ours primarily weather related, or what are the factors that create that elevated risk?
Yeah, I can tee it up, and then maybe Matt can chime in to supplement me here, right? So really, I don't know if we can go back to the waterfall slide, Heather. I think it demonstrates very well by different resource class, if their availability is diminished during a winter peak demand period, right? It could lead to a shortfall of reserves. I think the biggest contributor to that, right, is about 7 gigawatts of low hydro resources kind of drop it across that threshold. If you were to kind of stack up the thermal, the wind, and the solar, it wouldn't quite get you down to that degraded level. So it could be, a wide area winter weather event that could cause that. It could be, widespread loss of generating units from some other degrading event. We try to stay a little bit neutral. NERC does when it comes to the root cause of that type of event. However, we rely on our regions and our areas to provide us, a historical context for that type of event. Matt, did that tee you up good enough?
Yeah, that's absolutely right, Jared. So yeah, so these 10 percentile hourly availabilities, they're based off over 10 years of data that we have in our Maverick models, and it shows that at the hour forecasted to be the peak hour, this is the anticipated availability given the conditions for these resources. I think you already hit on a little bit that the concern is also that in these situations under extreme peak demand, the region would also be somewhat reliant on imports at the time. And if it's a widespread area, as you mentioned, basin may not be able to help out because they may be having their own reliability concerns. And another interesting thing I should just note is just year over year, the demand forecast we received this year versus the one we received last year. I don't have a slide or a graphic to show it, but it's 10% greater for this region this year. And that's due to the distinct load growth that you mentioned, data centers specifically being one of the largest factors in that.
So for Matt and Jared, I know that NERC in particular and FERC have been doing a great amount of work since Winter Storms Uri and Elliott in looking at different ways to shore up the gas system and to provide that coordination to make sure that you minimize the probability of derates, right, from the gas system, the wellhead freezing, so can you talk a bit about that work and what you see and whether that's been primarily in the Southeast and Southwest, or are you seeing responsiveness from around the country on that for gas generators and gas developers, I guess, at the wellhead?
Yeah, absolutely. We've actually taken the insights from Winter Storm Elliott and Uri and updated our data solicitation forms for NERC for our long-term and seasonal reliability assessments and our narrative surveys. So we've been collecting information across the country all areas to see what they're doing to shore up against gas-electric interdependence issues. I should say, right, I presented a graphic here that tried to highlight regional insights. Those highlights don't necessarily mean those topics actually just came up in those regions. A lot of them were mentioned in various assessment areas. And, you know, I kind of rolled everything up just to kind of anonymize a little bit. So we're getting those narratives and we're getting those responses in, and it seems to be happening across the continent, right? Especially for areas that have high dependence seasonally on natural gas. We're also conducting a number of studies with the national labs, partnering with academia and other institutions to do deep dives, looking into regional dynamics, right, on the natural gas system, pairing them with electric system models and trying to identify risks for current and future additions of gas-fired generators. One such study is the Northeast Power Coordinating Council, NPCC, gas electric interface study that came out a couple months back. We're looking to do that more consistently across the continent in future projects.
Thank you. And Matt, I know at WEC, there is a group that is going out as a part of its usual work, but in the audits, the physical audits of going and looking at what different entities are doing with their system. Are you seeing a focus on this in the Northwest region and the Basin region of WEC?
So I'm actually not kind of privy to the audits and what they're showing. Unfortunately, I don't have much information beyond what's shown on that gas and electric slide in terms of what's coming up in those audits and what folks are doing. I mean, again, you know, the Northwest has similar statistics to the interconnection-wide poll. You know, 60% of folks are actually trying to, in some way, shape, or form, take into account the gas system, whether it be modeling constraints of pipelines or what have you. One thing we did notice is that what's absent from electric gas coordination is any modeling of the storage system or anything in that realm. We've noticed a distinct absence of that. And then just beyond just the volume portion of the contract terms, there's not much out there that's modeling anything in that realm either. But really, that's one place where we could see improvement, I think, is if some of the storage aspects could be implemented in the electric gas studies.
When you say storage, are you referring to electric storage or gas storage?
Gas storage.
Thank you.
Thank you so much to our first set of speakers for queuing us up at the larger level. And now we are going to zoom in to utility system level with our second set of speakers, starting with Paul Wood at PacifiCorp.
Good morning. Thanks for the introduction. Paul Wood with PacifiCorp. My function is Director of Portfolio Optimization. I work in the operations side of the business, working with our gas traders and power traders. We just want to thank the Washington UTC for giving us this opportunity to talk a little bit about our winter preparedness and collaborate with some of the other utilities present today. If I could get my first slide. There we go. Thank you, Ariel. Maybe the next slide. I just want to touch upon briefly the PacifiCorp footprint, if you will. PacifiCorp serves a little over 2 million customers across 6 states. PacifiCorp has 2 balancing areas. We have a balancing area in the Northwest that primarily serves Oregon and Washington. We also have a balancing area in the Southwest, primarily centered on Utah, as well as Idaho and Wyoming. We have about 66,000 miles of distribution lines. We own about 17,000 miles of transmission lines. Our peak combined system load across the 2 balancing areas is around 12,700 megawatts for a peak demand. Our system is comprised, our generation system is comprised of about 72 generating units, thermal, both coal and natural gas, as well as a pretty robust hydro system in the Northwest. We have a considerable amount of wind assets in Wyoming as well as in the Northwest, and solar as well. As a matter of fact, we're adding a number of battery resources to our system. We have about a 200 megawatt battery coming online in the later part of December, as well as a considerable amount in June of next year. Next slide. I just wanted to kind of touch a little bit about the forecasted winter coming up. This is just a map from NOAA that's talking a little bit about the winter outlook for October, November, and December. You can see in the Northwest, Oregon, Washington, the expectation is a normal winter, if you will, temperature-wise. And then as you move into our Southwest service territory, kind of Idaho, Utah, and Wyoming, they're forecasting a little bit of an above normal temperatures. Next slide. Just briefly touch on the same, actually the Q1 time period, January, February, and March. This is when we start looking at seeing below normal temperatures across the Northwest, both in Oregon as well as in Washington, and kind of a normal forecast for the rest of our service territory in the Southwest. Next slide. Thanks, Ariel. So this slide, what I wanted to kind of focus on here is talk a little bit about kind of our resource and transmission additions since last year. Starting the tail end of 2024 and into 2025, PacifiCorp has added about 1,000 megawatts of new wind generation. That wind generation is primarily in the Wyoming area. We currently have about 4,700 megawatts of wind capacity in Wyoming. In the Northwest, we have about 750 megawatts of wind capacity. Solar, we just recently added about 320 megawatts of new solar in kind of our Southwest BA, the PACE BA, if you will, kind of that Utah, Wyoming area. Currently, we have about 4,700 megawatts of solar capacity. We also added a little more capacity on one of our natural gas plants located in Utah called Lakeside. We picked up about 75 megawatts of additional capacity there. Like I also mentioned a little bit ago, we are bringing online our first battery resource, a 200 megawatt battery that is expected to come online the end of December this year. In addition, we added new transmission, moving kind of those new wind resources into our PACE BA. That additional transmission moves about 1,200 megawatts of capacity. While I'm focusing on kind of our Southwest area, the advantage that the PacifiCorp footprint brings is we have a diversity not only in load, but also in generation. While we have a lot of generation, thermal generation, and renewable resource generation in the Southwest region, we have a pretty extensive transmission system that moves a lot of that generation west into our Oregon and Washington service territory. The advantage there is that not only do we have diversity in generation, but we have diversity in load. The Northwest is still a winter peaking utility or area, and in the Southwest, we're a summer peaking utility. So we can take advantage of opportunities where we have excess capacity in the wintertime in the Southwest and move those resources over to the Northwest to help serve our Oregon and Washington load during those winter time periods when it is needed. Next slide. Thanks, Aria. I also just wanted to touch a little bit about kind of our operation planning. As we're looking at the winter season, we've really started this probably the end of last spring, and we started focusing on the upcoming winter and thinking about, what do we need to prepare for on this winter season. We look at our transmission system, transmission rights we own, moving energy from either the Southwest to the Northwest or Northwest to the Southwest. We look at our gas transportation contracts. Next thing we look at is, we have a lot of internal communication between our generation fleet and ensure that, everybody's on the same page for what our expectations are for our winter needs. Any planned outages that, need to be taken care of, we try and get those done ahead of time before the winter season happens. We have a lot of communication between our gas desk and our power desk, and making sure that both the gas traders and power traders are looking at markets, looking at our system needs in a coordinated effort. We're also working with our counterparties to ensure that, we have the flexibility on their systems that we expect to need during these winter time periods. Next slide. The other thing we do is we utilize our optimization model, the PCI model. We run different scenarios for different expectations in the winter time periods. Expectations being if we lose a certain transmission line, a gas or power coal resource that may limit our ability to serve our load. We look at our VER forecasts from a P50 standpoint. We look at our storage, natural gas storage contracts to make sure that our storage facilities are full as we move into the winter time period, so that in the event we need additional gas, we have that gas stored and able to pull that out to serve our gas generation. Our gas generation fleet, we've recently in the last couple of years converted two Jim Bridger coal plants to natural gas. In this January, we're converting two other coal plants over to natural gas as well. So gas is definitely part of our future for serving our loads as we pull in more variable energy resources like solar and or wind. We have those resources to help regulate those variable resources. We also are working with the regional market, the Cal ISO WEAM market, to help optimize the entire WEAM footprint. And again, a lot of communication between our operations groups, both the generation, the transmission group, as well as our hydro folks, to ensure we're well prepared for the upcoming winter season. I think that is the end of my presentation. I can turn it over to, I think Bonneville is going next.
That's right. Let's hand it to Rob Hawkins from Bonneville. Thank you so much, Paul.
All right, good morning. Can everyone hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Great, all right. Well, I don't have any slides prepared for this meeting this time around, but I think my messages are pretty simple and don't really require graphics. So to start out with, we're not forecasting any unusual maintenance outages through the duration of the winter. So we're expecting and planning for a normal amount of capability to meet load during a short duration cold snap. As usual, long duration cold snaps can become energy limiting, particularly during low water years, as we've been having the last few years. It is very early yet in the water year and snowpack building, so we have a good amount of uncertainty on how much available fuel supply we'll have for generation, as well as the associated impact of flood risk related constraints that impact power flexibility through late December to April. What that means is with a large snowpack, we would draft storage projects lower through the later half of the winter in preparation for spring runoff. This provides greater wintertime generation through the system. The last 3 water years have been below average, so less winter draft was available due to other non-power objectives. Lastly, fish passage constraints or fish passage operations are currently uncertain for this coming year. Depending on what operations are implemented, this could impact our ability to respond to unexpected events starting in March, though March generally has a lower probability of extreme weather. And that's all I really have. I don't think we have a transmission representative this time around, so unless there are questions, that's all from BPA.
And we'll actually, we're still a little behind, so unless there are major questions from the bench. Okay, thank you so much, Rob. Please hang out for the end of the panel where hopefully we'll have time for questions. And we will hand it to John Edgerly from Seattle City Light.
Hi, good morning. Just pull up my slides here. Okay, is that the right? Are you seeing full screen mode?
Not yet. I think you have to go to slideshow at the top. So, oop.
I'm gonna try again here, sorry.
Okay. So we still see the whole slide deck. If you, in the toolbar at the top, it says File, Home, Insert, Draw, go to Slideshow,
Okay.
and then click from beginning, and that should work.
Okay, is that working?
Maybe I'm wrong. It's not working.
No.
Try the slideshow.
I think
Try the slideshow icon at the very bottom of the screen on the right-hand side next to the slide bar.
Yeah, I was doing that one and it's throwing it on a different screen that I see.
Let's just, for time's sake, let's just go with what you have
with this.
displayed.
Just zoom in
That's fine. Thank you.
Sorry. I'm not used to Zoom. Okay, so sorry about the delay. My name is John Edgerly. I'm a power marketer at Seattle City Light. And I'll give you an overview of how we think about winter readiness at City Light. Some overlap with some of the last couple of speakers. So with 88% of our electricity coming from hydropower, we view winter readiness in the context of current hydrologic conditions and seasonal weather forecasts. This year, as some other folks have already mentioned, we're expecting weak La Nina conditions to persist throughout the winter, which often means wetter, cooler weather in the Pacific Northwest, and can also lead to above average snowpack conditions, which can help us out later in the year with spring and summer flows. But one of the other possible factors with the La Nina is there's potentially greater potential for polar outbreak events later in the winter due to a weaker polar jet, which can allow that Arctic air to reach down into Pacific Northwest. And the forecasters are generally saying the chances of that are higher later in the winter, so January, February timeframe. If we look at the seasonal weather outlook, it's consistent with that typical La Nina pattern. So we're calling for below average temperatures and above average precipitation in the winter this year in the Northwest. But as was mentioned, many of our watersheds in the Northwest, including those where our hydropower assets are located, have been in 3 years of drought. And we're, even with that above average precipitation, the forecast is suggesting that drought conditions will improve, but still persist throughout most of the winter and may not recover back to normal or above normal until later in the spring when that snow melts. Excuse me. So to talk about the levers that we have available to us as we make sure we are ready for winter. First one is outage management. So we plan our generation outages to occur in the fall. So we have as close to full capacity available as possible in the winter months to meet those peak winter load periods. In terms of water management, we are conserving water storage in our reservoirs in the fall so that we'll have more available in the winter, in those winter months for peak, meet the water to use for hydropower generation during the peak events. When our forecasts and modeling indicate that it's a good idea, we can also procure power, some of our winter power on the forward markets to lock in pricing ahead of time and avoid exposure to volatile pricing during the extreme events. And we're always closely monitoring weather forecasts, looking for that indication that prolonged extreme cold in the region could occur. It's often won't know until a 7 to 10 day window, but that gives us some lead time to start to prepare before it actually arrives. And then the last one is new this year. We're starting a large industrial curtailment program, pilot program with a couple of our large industrial customers, with the goal of reducing, when we see these events coming in the next several days, we can reach out and ask that they cut back on their load for a set period of time. And then it's a voluntary incentivized program where they would get financial incentives to do so, to participate. And that's about all I have in terms of slides. I can open it up for questions.
Thank you. Thank you. We will actually keep moving, but if you could stay nearby, that would be great. We will switch to our natural gas utilities now, and I'm going to share my screen for Scott Johnson from Northwest Natural.
Got to use your mic there and bring it really close, and people on the Zoom call can hear you too.
All right, you can hear me now?
I need to project a little.
All right, there we go. So on the next slide, which was my first real slide, Dan Kirshner did cover it fairly well. I just do want to highlight, I did steal it from his presentation or from his annual outlook. I do want to highlight just a couple things. This is a slightly different map. There's a few pricing points that I'm going to talk about later on in my presentation. So if you look in the top left corner, there's Station 2. That's a point that we buy gas up in British Columbia. ACO, really that whole blue system, across that whole blue system is another pricing point. Down off the map is the US Rocky Mountains. That's another pricing area. You can see on the Washington-Canadian border, Sumas, that is an integral part to the Pacific Northwest market there. Other pricing points that I'm not specifically focused on at Northwest Natural, but you may hear others in the natural gas space talk about, are Kingsgate on the Idaho, British Columbia border, and then Stanfield in eastern Oregon. Another important piece of this map, obviously, well, for Northwest Natural, we take all of our supplies at some point in time, practically all of our supplies off of Northwest Pipeline. There's other utilities that also can take service off of GTN, which is the pink line here. And then storage is a key component to the natural gas system. The stars are 2 underground natural gas storage facilities. The Tan Star in Northwest Oregon is our mist facility, owned and operated by Northwest Natural. Jackson Prairie is just north of that. And then there are several triangles on this map. Those are LNG facilities. Northwest Natural does own and operate 2 LNG facilities behind our system in Portland and in Newport on the coast. Let's go ahead and move to the next slide. I was asked as part of this presentation to channel Northwest Pipeline. So I reached out to them and did get these bullets. So they, being that pipeline that runs across all of Washington, Oregon, really delivering the lion's share of the supplies to us, do need to be ready for winter, and we need them to be ready for winter. Their facilities, their districts have established winterization procedures. They've been ensuring that that's all taking place. One of those LNG facilities in central Washington is called Plymouth LNG. That is being filled still. It's about full, and that is in preparation for winter demand. And they have a maintenance program. They're wrapping up most of the maintenance right now. There's one compressor that's been particularly troublesome this year. If you want to hear any of the natural gas schedulers talk about their drama this summer, the Chehalis compressor has been having issues, and it's restricted flows from Sumas down the I-5 corridor, and they're doing what we hope to be some final maintenance right now on that one, and wrapping up the rest of their maintenance. And then as part of their weather resiliency plan, they're doing real-time monitoring, looking at weather, looking at flows across the pipeline based upon all of that information that they're able to pull into the system. And then they also have a mock event, which we held in early September to kind of show what would an outage do and how would we react. There's a lot of utilities that participate in that process. That's often through the Northwest Mutual Assistance Agreement, but Williams is a leader in that space. So their summary is that their critical winterization activities are on track from Northwest Pipeline's perspective. Next slide, please. Here's a chart that focuses on the peak resources for a peak day for Northwest Natural specifically. I'd just highlight the right side of this chart has our mist storage. This is the mist storage attributable to our core customers, plus our LNG facilities are over half of our peak day. That's all on our system. It provides great resiliency. We really do appreciate having these storage assets. If you look also, we do have a contract at Jackson Prairie taking our storage total up even further, over half, and then we do rely on the pipeline for about 40% of our peak day. Just to kind of draw back on recent history, in 2024, January 2024, when we had our most recent actual peak day, our gas supply portfolio was 8 million decatherms, or 8 million therms, sorry, about. And this supply portfolio is for 10 million therms. So there was still a little bit of space there. When we had 8 million therms of sales load, we also had about another million therms of send out on our system, so a total of 9 million therms. That Northwest Natural system throughput for about 800,000 customers on the peak hour was just over 400,000 therms, and that's equivalent to about 12 gigawatts of electric generation being produced, which was larger than BPA's peak at that time of about 11 gigawatts. So just to put it in perspective there, what this chart really can do. One other thing I'd just like to highlight, as far as resiliency goes, we've had some compressors that were past their useful life, giving us fits and starts similar to that Chehalis compressor that I just mentioned on Northwest Pipeline. We've finished replacing one of those large turbine units, and it's in service and ready for this upcoming winter. So we're very happy to have that in place. Our second large turbine at Mist is going to be replaced this next summer, and we'll have it in place for the next winter. Go ahead and move to the next slide, please. So I have this and one more slide. This is focused now on the market. And really, we're an infrastructure constrained area. As soon as you have weather on top of the constraints that we typically see on the pipeline, it can exacerbate prices in the market. This chart is focused on monthly prices. So the natural gas market, several days before a new month, looks at the price average, and that's the price for the month on the first of month basis. Obviously, you also have daily pricing. Daily pricing is more volatile than this. So as an example for that, if you look at one of the spikes that's in 2019, it was actually March of 2019. I think first month pricing was like $10. A few days into March, we were super constrained. We had some issues, and the daily market was $200. So, and that's per decatherm. And you can see a more recent first of month price spike was that January of 2023, where it was almost $50. That was actually not due to weather and issues in our area, but really constraints in the California system that impacted the Rockies prices, and then therefore the Sumas prices, which are tied together there. I think that's all I really wanted to cover, other than obviously the history. We've seen more volatility in the recent past. Our current forward market here remains elevated at Rockies and Sumas. The theme is generally lower priced gas can be found in Canada if you can get it across a pipeline. Obviously, those pipelines are fully utilized, and all the molecules that can come down are. And then the prices are higher than at Sumas and then in the Rockies. Just nationally, thinking about our fundamentals going into this winter, storage has filled actually better than was expected when prognosticators were making their guesses in April. We are still above the 5-year average, a little bit above last year for national storage levels. And then on the production side, we're seeing continued higher levels of production, breaking records through 2025 there. At the same time, gas is an important commodity throughout the world, and LNG is connecting the United States to the world with those export facilities. That's driving much higher demand. And I'm sure you're all aware also the first LNG export facility is now online in Canada, LNG Canada. We do have another one coming online in a couple years at Wood Fiber, which has, I think, a lot of us concerned about what that will do to restrict supplies into our area. And I did want to just kind of in the spirit of winter planning and readiness, I did hear one comment on the electric side about the hydro system, and depending on where we're at on the hydrology water levels, that it could mean if we're having a poorer water year, that later in the season we might be more constrained on the electric system. I'm hoping I heard that right. I wanted to echo that from a gas system standpoint, especially from underground storage. Just the dynamics of pressure within a storage facility means that we are able to deliver at our expected rates that are in that chart until the mist facility drops below half full. For Jackson Prairie, it's at 60% that it starts to decrease its deliverability. We model that in our IRP and focus on keeping it at least half full until our modeled peak day, which is in early February. So the takeaway from that is, from a winter planning and readiness perspective, if we had a super cold peak day event in later February, it's likely that our storage facilities would be lower and it'd be difficult to deliver at the pressures and volumes that we needed to. Of course, we've done historical modeling to target that peak day as kind of being as late as early February, but weather doesn't always cooperate with historical modeling. So that is a risk I just wanted to highlight. One other just regional thing, we're focused on this next winter, but it was asked to highlight anything that we see coming up in the next several winters. I did mention wood fiber. I assume you all are aware of that, and if you have any questions, I'm happy to address. Seen updates to it recently. One other piece of information that just came out this last week, Fortis in British Columbia received approval to build a new LNG facility behind their system. Currently they have the Tilbury LNG facility in place. It's reached end of life, retired, and it's being replaced. The new facility is actually going to be about twice the capacity. It's going from 1.5 BCF to 3 BCF. But then the daily deliverability is actually much larger. It's going from 150,000 decatherms a day to 800,000 decatherms a day. So they're really focused on having a little bit larger of a battery, right? Storage tank, and being able to serve their customers through any sort of resilience events that may impact them. Obviously, could be beneficial to our entire region. The facility is expected to come online in 2030, so we got 5 years to wait. But to the extent that storage is feeding the gas system here in the Pacific Northwest, we see that as a benefit. And I, for one, am grateful that infrastructure should be able to benefit us in the future. And that ends my portion of the presentation.
So I had a question about the Northwest Pipeline, and whether you're obviously not representing Northwest Pipeline, but you were able to explain a few things. Do you know if Northwest Pipeline provides its own production and gathering facilities, or is it only a transportation pipeline?
That's a great question. I would say that Northwest Pipeline is only a transportation pipeline.
Okay.
They do have subsidiaries that venture further upstream to production.
Okay.
But that's not specifically related to Northwest Pipeline. And then obviously they do have ownership in Jackson Prairie and Clay Basin, the other storage facility in the Rockies.
Okay, and then in terms of the LNG facilities in British Columbia, the second one sounds like it's more, as you said, storage for their own service territory. There have been some interesting issues with Enbridge in the past that have created problems. I can understand why they would want to have that security. As they're filling that, though, that would likely impact prices at the same time that Northwest Natural and other utilities are trying to fill storage.
Yeah.
So you would anticipate a price impact, I would imagine.
There should be a small incremental demand on the system, especially in the summer. That's typically when the liquid is created. It's a slow process, and so it shouldn't be a volatile component to demand. It should be a slow, steady, but increase in demand over especially this summer.
And is Northwest Natural looking at additional sources of gas? I know that the system is, or I guess this is really more a question of Northwest Pipeline. Are they pursuing additional facilities to bring more gas into the system?
Northwest Pipeline had a recent acquisition of Mountain West Pipeline, and that pipeline and Northwest Pipeline combined are connected to many assets in the Rockies. and they do have several expansions to producers to try and bring on more supply for the Rockies specifically. When we focus on the Rockies, I think we would mainly target the Opal point there. There are public slides that show which projects they have within that footprint in the Rockies to try and give better access to that gas. On a macro scale, though, if you think about the gas market, there's other basins that have a cheaper cost to drill and bring that gas to market. So you do typically need slightly higher prices to bring more gas on in the Rockies than you would in the Permian, in the Haynesville, or in the Appalachia, or in Canada.
So thanks, Scott. And you mentioned the new, in 2 years, I guess, the LNG export for Canada, and that's more immediate, I guess, in terms of, potential impacts. And I've heard you mention this a couple of times, which is, okay, we're getting the sort of the warning, but what are you doing similar things in anticipation of that, or how are you hedging on that one?
Yeah, Northwest Natural specifically, we have in our IRP communicated that we're going to stop relying on purchases at Sumas in the spot market that we can't effectively hedge or buy in advance. That our segmented capacity that we rely on. If you remember back to that pie chart, 40% comes on the pipeline. In 2027, we're going to take that 40% down to 34%, and then we have the mist facility that we can recall for our customers. So that mist facility will go up by that 6%. And that's in 2027. So 60,000 decatherms a day of peak day is going to be shifted due to this market risk. And then we typically baseload gas for the upcoming PGA year. We've executed a few deals that span larger periods of time at Sumas to ensure that we're locking down supplies in advance.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. We will turn to our next natural gas utility, Cascade. Chris Robbins, are you prepared to screen share?
I believe I am. Let's see if we can make this happen. And let's see if I can get this. How does that look?
So we're seeing your notes that don't have anything in them.
We're on screen then, I'm sharing.
And now we're seeing your very cool plant background.
That is our LNG plant in Richland, Washington. Throw that in there as a quick. How about that? Same notes.
Still seeing the notes.
Oh my. Well, can we just run with it? It's a time. I don't have any notes on there anyway. So let's just go with it. I'm sorry about that. It's from the game. My name is Chris Robbins. I'm the Director of Gas Supply and Control for Cascade Natural Gas. And I'm hoping to give you guys some time back here with some quick slides. I knew Scott was going to do a great job with our regional outlook. So I just wanted to give a little quick view of what Cascade's prepared to do this winter and some of the events that occurred in the past here, how that might relate on a more micro scale. So anyway, start off, for those that don't know, Cascade's part of a utility group. It consists of 4 natural gas utilities and 1 pipeline across 8 states, a little over 1.2 million customers, and a small electric footprint there in the Midwest. Of course, I'm here to focus a little bit more on Cascade there in Washington, Oregon service territories there. And of course, now my slides are not moving forward.
Chris, do you want me to take over?
If you would, that'd be fantastic. You can.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
You'll have to click stop sharing first.
Done.
Okay, am I in the right place?
I think you are. Thank you very much for doing that for me. I know now you know why we put Scott up there to give the good presentations. But yeah, that's it. So I'm going to focus on of course, Washington here. So we can go to the next slide. Are you seeing my supply stack?
Yes, we're seeing storage resources.
Oh, should be next number 2, a supply stack.
Peak day stack example.
Perfect. Thank you very much. So yeah, just to give an example of how we meet peak day demand. We've got our long term at the base there. It's going to consist of 1 to 3 years out, both fixed price physicals and index based gas. And then we've got the next component there is your spot purchases, the day market essentially, or for the month purchases. And then our storage assets would make up both that Jackson Prairie Mist and Plymouth LNG storage. I think the main takeaway, it's not unlike any of the utilities in the Northwest, is this kind of reliance on gas storage to make a peak day resource stack. So it's fairly important component, and we certainly rely heavily on that storage, those storage fields. I think we can go ahead and move to those storage resources, which also just a lot of details. I think the takeaway down there is just, in the wintertime, those storage components are going to make up 53% of our needs, up to that much, and a little under 15% of our total winter demand. Again, I think Cascade's probably a little low on storage compared to some of the other utilities. They have a little more access to some of the storage assets than we do, but it still plays a pretty prominent role in our supply stacks there. And then if we kind of go to that last slide, if you can see that chart. These are the 3 pipelines that Cascade has direct connections with. Enbridge crossed at the border. Northwest Pipeline, of course, as Scott mentioned, is our main supplier in Washington. And then GTN for us is essentially our Central Oregon assets. And I really kind of wanted to break out the core being, of course, those that don't know, are essentially your residential, your weather sensitive load. Transportation, that's going to consist mostly of everything from oil refineries and large food processors down to schools and hospitals. And then, of course, power generation. I broke that out from that transportation group just to kind of highlight how much of an impact that is on Cascade's system. Cascade has 8 gas-fired generation plants behind its gas distribution systems. 6 of those are utilities. So it makes up a significant load. And I'm sorry, this is a snapshot from January 15th, 2024, which of course is the day ahead of that Martin Luther King Day event that we're all so familiar with and been hearing so much about. And I wanted to bring this up because that next day is when we, of course, lost Jackson Prairie, and we had to kind of implement our mutual assistance process. And, to break it down simply, it's, supply coming in and demand going off that you're trying to solve for that imbalance. And when that supply got disrupted, Cascade looks at this and says, well, we're going to have to get rid of and curtail some load. And that's, as you see in that transportation and power generation, is a significant load that we can curtail off the system. And then as we take that power generation off, of course, that just turns into loss of electricity, and that turns into the electric market, and they're having to solve for that supply demand resource shortage. So again, that's kind of the basis of our gas and electric coordination efforts, which I think have been going great, but just thought this was a good example of how that impacted Cascade's system. And essentially that's all I was going to go through. So hopefully I was able to give you guys some time back.
You're helping get us there. Thank you for being here, Chris. We will round out this session with our dual fuel utilities, starting with Kevin Holland at Avista.
Yeah, Heather, I was going to run my slides, but if you have them, I would be happy to let you run them.
It means I can't note take, but if that's easier for our speakers.
Oh no, then I'll run them. That's fine. It'll just it'll be a little bit of a truncated screen. So let me see here.
Okay.
I think we got that one here.
That will work great. Thank you.
Okay, so you can see it. I can't see anything, but I have the slide deck, so hopefully that'll work. Good morning. Thanks for having me. My name is Kevin Holland. I am the Director of Energy Supply at Avista. Energy supply in our context is, as a dual fuel utility, is all of electric and gas on the day, delivery and optimization of those portfolios in the forward markets. I'll try and run through a couple of these slides quite quickly. See if I can get here. On that won't advance. Let's see. A quick summary of Avista, gas and electric utility. As I mentioned before, there's a map on the left showing our respective service territories, predominantly in Eastern Washington and North Idaho, and then also some various gas supply, LDC supplies in Washington and then Southern Oregon. So we have approximately 400,000-ish electric customers across Washington and Idaho, and about 370,000 natural gas customers in those two jurisdictions plus Idaho. And I'm hoping you're seeing these slides change.
It's perfect.
Okay, great. Redundant, and I'm very appreciative of both the two gas presentations that had this map, and we're going to throw it in there just in case anybody was blinking while the other two were up there. But Avista's key gas supply points: Sumas, Kingsgate up on the Alberta border, Malin, if we have to get down on the California-Oregon border, Stanfield, and of course, as mentioned before, Jackson Prairie. We are 1/3 owner of Jackson Prairie, so we rely on that pretty heavily for backing up our supply portfolio in the winter, which is, again, the focus of this presentation. Our resource mix, we're about 60% renewable, predominantly relying on hydro, some wind, biomass. There's a coal dot in there that will last for another 55 days, and then we'll be able to extract that one. And then natural gas is about 32% of the portfolio. So we've got approximately 1,000 megawatts of owned hydro facilities. And in there also, in terms of the variable energy resources, about 370 megawatts of variable. About 1,100 megawatts of owned thermal generating capacity, 800 of which is supplied by natural gas. So it's definitely a key component in our supply portfolio. This slide, this is a kind of a throwback to some of our Martin Luther King Day weekend. As Chris had mentioned earlier, that's kind of a highlight that's stirred up a lot of the activity around gas and electric coordination. And this is just a quick slide to show that about 70% of the demand that we had in terms of heat, we look at natural gas as either directly delivered to homes to produce heat or delivered to a generating facility to create electricity that's then delivered to home to create heat. About 70% of those heat molecules that were delivered to our homes in that winter period in 2024 on that very, very cold MLK Day were related to natural gas. So to highlight kind of the same things that have been said here, it's a very critical fuel both for delivery direct to burners in households, furnaces in households, and then also to electric generating plants to create that same heat delivered as electricity. So in preparation for winter, Avista goes through annually quite a review of our supply position and concentrates on diversification of that supply. So we don't try and concentrate any of our deliveries coming from any one certain hub or rely too heavily on one set of certain resources. And that applies both to electricity and gas. So to the extent that we have supply coming from, let's say, Mid-Columbia on the electric side, we may look for other supply or access to other supply by enhancing our transmission portfolio to draw energy perhaps on an optionality basis out of southern zones, Idaho, desert Southwest, California, so on and so forth. We do the same thing on the gas side. So if our portfolio of supply wouldn't rely necessarily on a single hub, let's say ACO, we experienced what a constraint there can do over that MLK weekend when the compressor station was lost at Crow's Nest. And so we continue to diversify our supply locations to other regional hubs, Sumas, Stanfield, Malin, so on and so forth, for at least a little bit of extra reach if we need it on the gas system. We also do maintenance coordination and kind of a no-touch period. That applies to all of our facilities, gas and hydro, especially across the December, January, and February period. We've also started a 4 times yearly outage coordination, complete with adding an optimization model or a Vista decision support system to optimize outages planned across the next year. And that helps us plan for upcoming winters and make sure that those outages that are planned are optimized and that we have a minimal impact on the winter period. That includes both gas and electric coordinated. So gas will come in and talk about system issues that they may see or planned maintenance that they have seen posted on the gas system that may impact delivery to electric generation. We participate in winter preparation calls with both of our supply pipelines, Northwest Pipe and GTN. We look also at what our portfolio is in terms of our winter gas hedge volumes, and we look at what the appropriateness is of the level of hedging, given what winter predictions in terms of weather, and we've seen those in slides and presentations previous. So in the upcoming winter, we looked at what our supply portfolio was and added additional hedges for the months of December, January, and February. We would also look on the electric side and assess whether or not hedging in the forward market, some of our surplus supply in terms of our variable units is appropriate given what winter conditions are coming up. For this particular winter, we assessed our portfolio in addition to having a very small load bias to account for variations in load. We also reserved some of our peaking units for additional electric generating capacity in critical months. We do, like I said before, an internal winter preparation with our gas operations to make sure that all the way down to the burner tip, everybody's in coordination, and we coordinate with our account executives in the very, very rare circumstance that we may have to call on demand reduction from any of our commercial or small industrial gas customers, as we did in the Martin Luther King Day weekend. And then storage position, very simply, very much like the other storage owners, we buy gas when it's less expensive, put it into Jackson Prairie, and really try to preserve it, have it full going into the winter months, and keep it full until such time as we've really passed those critical periods. Other considerations, participation and trying to develop the gas electric coordination group. We participated in the regional symposium, discussed all the issues, and are trying to push the message about the need for cooperation and different avenues we can pursue for cooperation. One of those avenues was a coordinated tabletop exercise. I think that was mentioned earlier, where a kind of an unsolvable scenario was posted, and the entire group participated in looking at ideas and potential actions that they might take to try to resolve it. Very informative, and kind of highlights some of the particular situations that aren't too unfathomable that could occur in our area and cause distress on the system. Also, BPA and CAISO appear to be very helping the situation in terms of coordinating transmission outages and making sure that connectivity between the two systems are available during the Pacific Northwest winter, as they have been for years, coordinating on the activity to make sure that those systems, those transmission lines are available for the summer. The critical points I was asked to share what situations might occur that would cause price spikes in the Pacific Northwest. Again, any sustained and widespread cold fronts, any kind of system issue, either in the bulk electric or gas system. Both of these, we can kind of look at the Martin Luther King Day weekend and say, sustained widespread cold front. We had gas disruption first coming out of the ACO system, out of Alberta system. That was resolved, and literally hours after that was resolved, we lost all communications and all withdrawal capacity out of Jackson Prairie. So those are major disruptions. Any sort of regional transfer constraints in terms of transmission outages or inability to move power across regions to help those in need. And California supply issues. I look back at, I think it was 2022, very widespread regional cold. California didn't have access to the Aliso Canyon storage facility and was forced to go buy large volumes of gas at Malin, which ran the prices up all over the Pacific Northwest or all the rest of the hubs as they were trying to supply their gas units to push power to their customers. Lessons learned. Having lists and communications and relationships with customers in terms of their ability to help in a demand response situation, both on the gas and the power side. We do have one commercial agreement with a customer, with an electric customer, to reduce, but most of the gas ones are voluntary. The value of a diverse energy supply, both gas and power, and locational. A full system integrated resource planning, as I mentioned before, when we're planning for maintenance, where it's a full system issue, and we implement an optimization model to try and appropriately site those in advance so that we know when those issues are going to occur and try to keep them out from going on top of one another and creating a critical situation. Evaluate backup supply, fuel opportunities, CNG trailers, LNG. We're looking into all of those opportunities to try and substantiate our system in a particular time of need. We do have a regional need for infrastructure, and it kind of ranges all across the board. Wires, pipes, generation, and storage. Continue to evolve this gas and electric coordination issue. Things like the symposium, and there's a significant value of coordinated regional programs, and as we evolve into day-ahead markets, I think there's going to be some help there, and certainly RAP is going to be a significant component. And that's all I had for today.
Thank you, Kevin, and for stepping up to plate with your slides. They looked great. Thank you. And we will round out this rapid fire utility system panel with Puget Sound Energy.
Good morning, everyone. Confirming you can hear me.
Sounds great. Thank you.
I'm Karen Doherty, Director of Gas Operations at Puget Sound Energy, and I'll kick off our presentation, but I'm going to be tag teaming with my colleague, Ryan Murphy, on the presentation. And to set the stage, our first slide provides an overview of PSE's customer and energy delivery assets. Stephen, thank you. I'll just cover a few highlights. The graphic illustrates our service territory, and just a couple takeaways from that. You'll notice there isn't 100% overlap between our gas and electric service areas. And then secondly, our customer base is quite diverse. So we have very dense urban centers with key large customers, and also serving very small farming communities. The slide also has a bullet on our total generation capacity that comes, of course, from hydro, thermal, wind, and solar. And our ownership interest is about 50% of the megawatts that we have identified on the slide. What's not listed on the slide is we do have 2 natural gas storage facilities. You've heard Jackson Prairie mentioned several times. We are 1/3 owner of Jackson Prairie, and we are also the operator of Jackson Prairie. In the Tacoma Tide Flats area, we have a liquefied natural gas plant. And in addition to that plant providing shipping fuel, it also provides LNG that we utilize in one of our peak shaving plants that I'll talk about in a minute when we get into the winter readiness. And we can also vaporize directly into our distribution system utilizing that plant. So moving on to winter readiness. On the gas side, this is really the bulk of this is our retail focus, our retail system. So we have a documented cold weather action plan, and the plan is developed from modeling our gas system. It's updated annually. It utilizes prior year performance and as well as any load changes on our system and forecasting of new load. We review it internally, and then we do operational dry runs of the plan. The plan is tier-based, and what that means is there's different load levels that trigger a cascading set of actions. And those actions include, really first is the operation of our LNG peak shaving plant. This is located in Gig Harbor. This is not the Tacoma LNG plant. We can also inject compressed natural gas into our system. We have various sites already, permanent sites throughout our system that we can inject into. And we have a fleet of CNG trailers to do that. We can also perform bypass operations at key locations. So what that means is instead of sending the gas through the normal pressure reduction, we'll manually bypass those regulators. And then lastly, and really very conservatively, we do have some interruptible customers that we might curtail as part of our cold weather action. With regard to the 2 gas storage facilities that I mentioned, both target specific inventories prior to the winter peak season. And then for Tacoma LNG specifically, my gas operations team works with that plant team to prepare for winter readiness through vaporization test runs. What I don't have here is that our gas control and pressure control teams also meet quarterly with Williams Northwest Pipeline and just had a meeting a couple weeks ago. So we coordinate regularly with those folks. And with that, I am going to turn it over to Ryan to cover the electric side of this slide.
Okay, thank you, Karen, and good morning, commissioners. It's nice to see you. So I'll echo the sentiment that it's always good to be here and have good conversations. My focus today is really going to be on electric supply, and what I'd like to do is really kind of break up my presentation into 2 parts: the process with which we plan energy, how we maintain situational awareness, and then leading into the day of how do we respond to unplanned incidents, low hydro, forced outages, maybe demand forecasts being different than expected. So I want to first touch on the energy supply planning aspect of this. And it's important that I first note that we have the resources and the capacity contracts in place going into this winter to meet our winter planning targets. So we're in a good position going into this winter. By the way, as I talk about energy supply on the electric side, we really need to think about 2 things. It's number 1, energy supply constraints, the generation of energy itself. And then secondly is, do we have the high voltage pathways in place to deliver that energy? I'm going to spend most of my time today talking about the energy supply piece, but I will touch a little bit on the pathway aspect as well. As we get into the winter period, the weeks ahead, our energy supply team meets weekly with our meteorologists to really understand weather forecasts. What are we expecting for, what are we forecasting for demand? What are the temperatures? What are the hydro conditions? What can we expect in the week ahead? And so we have a energy supply alert process where we escalate from green, yellow, amber, red. That gives us good situational awareness of how supply versus demand is shaping up in the week ahead. And then as we get to the day ahead planning timeframe, how are we doing with meeting our demand and meeting the reserves? And I'm going to talk about reserves a little bit because that's a really important piece of this conversation as we get into the day ahead and day of. When we talk about the electrical system configuration, transmission studies, just a quick note there. Leading into the winter, we're doing everything we can to get our high voltage transmission lines back in service. Any planned work that was going on, projects that were going on, we're getting the configuration of our system in the most robust state we can. And we also study for any outages that are requested through these months. We have a power model that studies. It goes one by one and takes other transmission lines out of service and then evaluates for overloads. And so there's a whole planning process to ensure that our N-1 risk is low if we went ahead with a planned outage. And then finally, for this slide, I'm going to touch on it again, conservation efforts. So we are at PSE going to be taking conservation efforts and messaging at various levels, including general messaging as we're going into cold weather, where we're going to ask our customers for help to conserve energy and help us get through higher demand periods. And then on the next slide, I'll talk a little bit about what it looks like as we go into the day of, what demand response tools we would utilize, and then finally conservation appeals prior to the risk of load shedding. So for now, I'll hand it to you, Karin, and let you take the gas ops.
Yeah, so what we have on this slide is really just what levers do we have available to pull in case of an energy emergency, and how hard would we pull them depending on the situation. So if we have a natural gas supply energy emergency, the Northwest Mutual Assistance Agreement will kick in, and all parties involved in that agreement connect and identify what is the regional impact and what are potential mitigation measures, what is it that we need to address. So again, on the retail gas side, what we'll do is curtail interruptible loads per our tariffs, and we do have a documented energy emergency plan, and that includes curtailment of both retail sales interruptible as well as transportation interruptibles. Ryan just mentioned customer conservation. We will and have asked and provided customer communications requesting conservation of energy under really extreme conditions. And then of course, in the worst case scenario, I would say we would curtail firm customers, but we have to do that through system isolation. We're not going to ask a residential customer to just stop using, or there's no interruptible load. We would have to shut in a system and isolate and force the non-use of the energy. I want to circle back to what Dan Kirshner started with in his opening. That is the last thing we want is gas customer outages, because of the complexity and the intensity of what we have to do to restore those customers. So, but we are prepared. We have a partnership through the NMAA. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Ryan.
Thank you. What I want to wrap my presentation up talking about is more the day of. And because I did mention the energy supply alert process where we gain visibility really in a week ahead view, and especially the day ahead. What do the day ahead bilateral markets look like? How much energy supply is available? And is there any risk to us meeting our reserves? So if I may, let me hit on reserves a little bit here. There's really three main reserve levels I want to talk about. What we call the planning reserve margins. And what this is this is a buffer for the planning time frame. It's a buffer of firm supply that allows us in the day ahead, in particular, to go into that day with some buffer, knowing that forecasts could be off, that demand could be higher than forecasted. That's a really important aspect. And that planning reserve margin is really a risk mitigation based on what we at PSE see is out in the day ahead. Contingency reserve obligation, so CRO, is effectively, it's another buffer, but it's for sub-hourly use, whereby if we have a forced outage, our balancing authority operators can call on those resources in the sub-hourly period. And then finally, there is a energy imbalance market EIM flex that CAISO has some pre-established calculations. So each hour ahead in the market and our positions, we need to be meeting those reserves, planning reserves, contingency reserves, as well as the flex. Those reserves, if they become at risk, so if we're in the day of and we are at risk of meeting our reserves, there is an energy emergency alert process that is documented within our NERC standard EOP 011. That standard itself really is a way that it's a requirement for balancing authority and transmission operators that essentially requires us to have operating plans to prepare for and respond to energy emergencies and to be coordinated with our reliability coordinator, CAISO. So as we get into the day and we're in the 3-hour time frame and looking ahead, if there's any hours where there's peak liquidity is a concern or where we're at risk for meeting our reserves, that's really where we escalate into these energy emergency alerts, beginning with an EEA watch and then progressing EEA 1, 2, and 3. If I go forward into the worst case scenario, EEA 3, that's really indicating that all of our generating assets are in use and we're using our contingency reserves at that point. So it's EEA 3, whereby we can lean on our reserve sharing group for an hour, Western Power Pool. So there's another safety net there where we can lean on the Western Power Pool for an hour. Leading up to this point, we'd be calling on demand response resources. We'd be calling for conservation. And finally, in a worst case scenario, if we could not meet firm demand, we'd be at a risk then of shedding load. We would have our emergency coordination center opened a day or two ahead of this to plan, to communicate with you all, and then to effectively make conservation appeals before we finally then would face a load shedding worst case scenario. And that our load shedding plans, which we meet and practice every year, are detailed in my final bullet there. energy emergency plan, that really speaks to the process by which we would go through a load shedding scenario at the very end of all of the steps I described. I think I'll stop there and see what questions there are.
So if it's okay with our bench and our speakers, I think folks need a break. So unless I hear any opposition, we will adaptively manage our calendar here. We'll break till 11. Then we will do a question and answer until about 11:10, and then we will start with our next session at 11:10, if that sounds okay to folks. Cool. Thank you very much, by the way. Utilities did a lot of magic behind the scenes to make this happen, so we really appreciate your coordination. And we will be back at 11 o'clock for question and answer. Thank you. We would like to open it up now to questions regarding the panel we just had on utility system readiness. And we'd like to start with questions from our bench of hosts here, if there are any. Dr. Blackman.
Thank you. And I'll start with Puget Sound Energy with Ryan, because these questions are about the electricity side. And Ryan, the last point you mentioned was the energy supply emergency plan. I may not have that title exactly correct, but I guess my question is that the plan that like is required under the state energy supply emergency law, or is this something that you've just developed, more as good practice over the years of operation?
Good question. I'm not sure if it ties to what you referenced or not. I did mention, just for sake of clarity, I did mention two different plans. One, the NERC reliability standard, and then finally the internal process energy management. Were you referring to the latter of those?
I was to the energy management. So as I understand it, that would be things like procedures for voluntary curtailment by large customers, or appeals by the utility or by government officials to conserve electricity.
Correct. And then the procedures themselves around our process of communications and the coordination of how we shed load. And for instance, how we would coordinate with our distribution operations team as well, to make sure that if our shortages span multiple days, how we would ensure equity of that load share. And so kind of all the communication pieces and I'm going to say the tactical steps. To be honest, I'm not sure if it ties to the state requirements that you mentioned. It is an internal procedure, but I can take that down and chase that question down.
Okay, thanks. That'd be great. And if any of the other electric utilities or BPA have plans like that, whether they could confirm that those are the ones that connect back to the state requirements, that would be helpful to me. Another question that I wanted to just briefly get to was in the area of industrial customers and the potential for them to reduce load. Both Seattle City Light and Puget Sound Energy mentioned using that as a way to help ensure resource adequacy during extreme events. And I wondered whether all the utilities are working on that, and, is BPA doing that with its utilities? And then B would be, to what extent customers, large customers who have backup generation are being coordinated with to make sure that their backup generators are ready to go and can be counted on during a critical situation. This is something that I've seen Portland General Electric work on, but I wasn't sure whether any Washington utilities are doing that.
Could I ask for clarification? Are you speaking more electric or gas or both?
This would be electric, except to the extent you need some gas to run one of the generators.
I'd be happy to chime in for Avista. On the electric side, we actually, I mentioned we do have a demand response customer under contract. The rest of them really, in terms of aggregating any that have backup generation, that's predominantly in our area hospitals, and they're not too keen on those types of curtailments unless it truly is an emergency situation. So we don't have a coordinated effort because we don't have a lot of large scale customers or enough large scale customers in our area where it would be helpful, I guess, to make that coordination in terms of those that have backup generation. However, we are working on that, and in our most recent RFP have asked for demand response programs from aggregators that can try to put those types of programs together for our benefit of our customers.
Thank you. So I have a question first for Kevin. You can come back on screen, sorry. What happened between 2021 and 2022 to increase the gas usage? Was that gas generation coming online, or did you just have a massive influx of customers in 1 year?
Was that pursuant to the
You
slide
had a
deck?
slide that between 2021 and 2022, what looked like your gas customer base.
Oh, sorry, that was a little bit misleading. If you look down at the dates at the bottom, Commissioner Rendell, that's actually a summer. That's a June 30th event.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, I was like, wow, what happened? That was massive. Okay.
Fair observation.
Okay, that helps clear that up. The other question, this is really for all three of the electric companies, is to what extent that you have gas thermal plants, that you have, and now the word's gone out of my head, you have firm capacity on the pipelines serving those gas plants, or are they on some kind of non-firm capacity service to your gas plants?
Well, maybe I'll answer because my face is still up here first, but we concentrate on having 100% firm transport available for our baseload units. There is some non-firm reliability in terms of some of our peaking facilities. However, those are locationally situated where on a short-term basis there is adequate deliverability available from potentially non-typical hubs. In other words, if you look at our Rathdrum peaker facilities, typically we would fuel those out of the north, but in a critical situation, there may be constraints for delivery from the north from ACO or Kingsgate. So we would look to more southern supply basins to fuel those units, and typically that's a backhaul of gas. And because so much gas is flowing from north south on that line, it's pretty easy to, I shouldn't say it's easy, it's more acceptable to buy gas going in a south to north direction. So we feel quite confident, and that's proven a viable strategy. Going forward, that may be different as we enter into a RAP situation where we need to really count on those. And if RAP does have a ongoing policy, or if they develop a policy that requires firm gas deliverability to count those resources in your forward position, then we would look to get firm gas transport. But for all of our base loads, yes, 100% firm.
Thanks. The others wish to weigh in?
Yeah, this is,
Oh. Go ahead.
yeah, hi, this
Go ahead,
is,
Paul.
yeah, Paul Wood from Pacific Corp. Much like Kevin at Avista, all our base load gas generation, whether it's on the east side of our system or the west side of our system, is on firm transportation.
So the Jim Bridger conversions are all on firm.
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. And now
Yeah.
PSC.
Yeah, I'm going to invite Chris Smith to answer this question for us.
Sure. Yeah, this is Chris Smith. I'm a manager on the trade floor in energy supply. So yes, similar to what was conveyed for our baseload units, we do have firm supply, firm transmission contracts. So a similar approach as the others.
And so that means you may have non-firm for some of your peakers, but do those, if that's the case, do they have backup?
Yeah, and so with our peakers, yeah, some of it can be on like secondary firm, but we also have diesel backup. So we have, of our, I think it's roughly 600 megawatts of our peaker capacity, roughly 300 megawatts of that we do have a diesel backup, and we also have close to 300 megawatts of diesel backup also on our combined cycle for base loads. So the combination of firm plus diesel backup is how we meet our capacity targets today.
Would we like to leave space for folks not on the bench to ask questions? Okay, that means we might eat into public comment and the next Q&A. But is there one question from someone? Oh, it looks like we have one more question from the bench. Go ahead.
Maybe to Jared. I'm just trying to following the hydro story for the winter, because it sounds like, one of the elevated risk sort of factors is 7% off normal hydro. But we heard from Rob at BPA that we don't quite know yet, and John at SCL suggested that weak La Nina year we would have more snowpack theoretically, but because of the drought years, that wouldn't sort of overcome the sort of snowpack deficit in terms of increased flows. Is that why, I guess, are you looking, if we're in this weak La Nina year, why would you suggest that we'll be off our hydro sort of average?
Sorry, it took me a little while to get off mute here. And I don't know if Matt Zapotowski from WEC has probably dropped off, but the way that WEC computes that resource D rate is by stacking up the availability, the hourly availability over the last 10 winters, and taking the 10th percentile of that distribution, right? So it's kind of agnostic and commingles when there's unit outages for maintenance issues as well as drought years. So it's agnostic to that.
Okay, so that's primarily a historical.
It's a historical
projection based on history, not necessarily. Okay.
Yes.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you for that clarification. Thanks. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I apologize to the public that we will have to move to our last session of the day. Thank you again, utility folks, for being here and coordinating behind the scenes. Let's move to our next session with Northwest Gas Association and the Pacific Northwest Utilities Conference Committee. I will screen share for this. There's been a lot of efforts behind the scenes on gas and electric coordination over the last year or so, thanks in part to these partners of ours. So we're looking forward to hearing from them. I will pull up these slides. And if we could, great. Bring you up with a mic, great. Okay. Is it Dan who's starting?
Crystal, you want to go ahead and start?
Yeah, I'm here. So I would love to start.
Great.
Hi. I'm Crystal Ball. I'm the executive director of what we call the Pacific Northwest Utilities Conference Committee, or also known as PNUC. And what we do at PNUC really are two things. We're a trade association for electric utilities, and we bring industry leaders together to enhance understanding, build shared knowledge, and really try to approach regional or approach solutions in a regional and coordinated way. PNUC, there are about 60 members of this trade association for electric utilities and industry partners. What you need to know about PNUC is it's the place in our region where investor-owned and consumer-owned utilities come together. So that's what makes PNUC different. They come together with industry partners like Energy Northwest, PowerX in our region. So again, it's a place to build shared knowledge and to develop solutions to regional challenges. The other thing that we do at PNUC is we produce the annual update to the Northwest Regional Forecast of Loads and Resources. And there's a slide in this deck where we'll get into that. But I'll just begin with what we do is we provide information. It's very educational, both for our members and for energy stakeholders in the region. So I greatly appreciate the opportunity to come today to share what PNUC and the Northwest Gas Association have been working on together. Thank you for making time to hear what we are trying to do for being partners in this coordination, because it's really important for our region and for the reliability of the energy system. Really, we're trying to build awareness and get people to think about the solutions to these challenges. Dan, you want to say anything about Dan and Kelly before we move into the slides?
I think they've already heard from us a little bit, so you'll see a couple of the slides that we presented before with some additional information. But I think it's appropriate, Crystal, for us just to move into the messages, or I would say the key points that all of our participants in the gas electric coordination initiative, maybe we should come up with a fancier name, but that works for me. These are really key messages. I hesitate to call them messages. They're facts, really, that the owners and operators of the energy delivery system in the Northwest all agree are true. And of course, we've got a little bit of data to share later that underscores some of these points, and I've already shared some of that data that also underscores some of these points. So, Crystal, you want to take these?
Yes, I will. And I have been thinking about the analogy that I shared just last week, and it doesn't really work when you're not in the room with me, Dan and Kelly.
Right.
But I've been thinking about it sitting here and listening. The metaphor is that our energy system is a heavy load, and the electric and gas system are partners in sharing this load. These two partners have to move in perfect sync to keep the system reliable. And the analogy is the gas and the electric side's carrying this heavy load. And if we aren't moving in perfect sync, you can see, imagine a big bucket of water and it's sloshing around. This is not a stable system. This is an uncoordinated system. And so what Dan and I have been working on is trying to get these two systems moving in more of a coordinated way across our region. And we are doing that because January 2024, which you have heard about many times this morning, and should not be a surprise to anybody in this industry in this region about what happened. Industry leaders came to Dan and I and asked us to work together to enhance coordination between these two sectors. What that January 2024 event revealed, and it wasn't the first time, there have been other examples in our region. These two systems are becoming increasingly interdependent on each other. And so Dan and I, again, carrying this heavy bucket, and it's going to transition to Kelly when Dan steps aside and Kelly really steps in. We are doing this because industry leaders asked us to work together. The region is dangerously close to not having enough energy. And the reasons why are we are seeing an projected increase in demand for electricity and or for energy across our region. And we are also having more of these prolonged winter events. So I think that's what, WEC and NERC covered. It's interesting to see, the attention that this region is getting on this elevated risk. We have been trying to build more awareness about why this region is becoming, why the risks are increasing and what we can do to mitigate these risks. And so that's, I think, Dan, a good maybe summary of these key messages. I'll turn it back to you.
Yeah, go ahead and go to the next slide, please. Thank you. One of the things, so we identified the executives of our respective member companies, including companies that overlap with memberships in both organizations. Identified was a series of steps, really, let's call them work streams. The first is what I'll refer to as operational readiness, which I'll get into here in just a moment. The second is the need to really express what we are experiencing into the region, communications, if you will. The third is an analytical basis, which we'll talk a little bit more about here. And then the fourth was the symposium, which really is not the culmination of our work, but is really the beginning of the next phase, right? So let's talk about operational readiness, where this is something that's been going on really on the gas side. You've heard referenced from the utilities, the Northwest Mutual Assistance Agreement. This is a gas supply agreement. It's when we have an outage on the system or something happens on the system, the pipelines convene a group of shippers to get together to try to figure out how to make the math work through that disruption. But one of the things that they do as part of their charter is they get together both prior to a winter season and post a winter season. And starting with October of last year, they've expanded the participation of that group to include really many of the people more on the electric side, some of whom were already participating as shippers. But we made a more concerted effort to include through this gas electric coordination initiative that NWGA and PNUC have been pursuing through that to kind of come alongside what was already happening and really open it up. And so this is this winter readiness coordination, and the objectives of it really are spelled out for you here. But what I want to highlight is one of the things we do is they have done and will continue doing is they produce these tabletop exercises. And I know Commissioner Rendall, you were part of a regional readiness forum that was hosted by the American Gas Association in conjunction with the Western Conference, they did a tabletop exercise there too, which was terrific. I think a lot of learnings happened. The best part of these table exercises, or the most exciting result of tabletop exercises, is not figuring out how, it's when we can't figure out how to solve for the problem that has been presented to the group, because that's when you really get people alert to and really thinking about, well, you know, we've got to really think through and be prepared for something that would happen. So as an example, the one that was done in conjunction with the Western Conference, lots went on there, and the facilitator of that exercise made clear the objective wasn't to solve the problem. The objective was really to get people's reactions to the problem, and they were very careful to try to identify some scenarios that could occur. During this October winter readiness program, it was BPA and Enbridge, the West Coast Pipeline, developed the scenario. Started with an outage on the electric system, and then I think one of the main lines that we import electricity through went down, and then it was compounded later by an outage on the gas system a couple days later. And again, it was not solvable in the room. We couldn't quite get to the last decatherm needed. And that's really a good outcome from a tabletop exercise, as I said, because it really causes people to think through. So the objectives really are to just strengthen this collaboration, to open up lines of communication, to get people thinking through things that could happen, have happened, maybe haven't happened all at the same time, but events that have happened, and it's really the ones that you don't expect, the black swan event, right? That is the one that we're trying to at least anticipate as best we can. So that's the winter readiness. You want to?
Hey, Dan.
Yeah, go ahead, Crystal.
Just to add there, what PNEC and the Northwest Gas Association can do is convene. It's really on the entities to participate. And I want to say that, you know, when we first imagined joining, what Dan said was the group already involved in the Northwest Mutual Aid Agreement preparations. You know, we got good turnout for that first October 2024 meeting. I saw a really remarkable increase in participation this year. And it's really just building that awareness that these people are getting together to do this event. I was quite impressed October 2025, how many different people were in the room participating. And it's really about building those relationships now outside of emergency situation, where people are sharing information and they know who to call. So we expect that PNEC and the Northwest Gas Association will continue to convene these groups. They are very much participant-led, and we hope more people will actively participate in them.
Yeah, great. Can you go to the next slide, please? Thank you. One of the, as I mentioned, one of the work streams was an analytical work stream. I think everybody in the room understands that there are a whole bunch of really studies that have been done relative to the energy system in the Northwest. Some of them are pathways to decarbonization. I think of the Washington State Energy Strategy or the Clean Energy Transformation Institute's Northwest Pathways study, to retrospectives on outages that have occurred in the region, resource adequacy assessments, and load forecasts like the ones that Crystal does. Crystal's group does the regional forecast, as well as the Northwest Gas Market Outlook and others that are done. The idea was all of these things have been done, but nobody's really taken a look at all of them together and tried to synthesize what are we saying, or what are all these different studies saying in common, what's missing from the analysis, and what are some recommendations that might come out of that. So if you go to the next slide, Crystal, you want to provide the summary of results here?
Yeah, real quickly, because I know we're pressed for time and we wanted to get into some of the other data that we brought. We jointly funded Guidehouse, as Dan was saying, to review these. And what they presented to us was a review of those reports. And what we found in common were things that we were already seeing, but it helped to have an independent consultant kind of review all these reports and highlight for that. So we were seeing some challenges with resource adequacy. We were seeing really this unprecedented projected demand for growth, and this growing interdependence between the two sectors. What we appreciated about that is there was the synthesis of these 19 reports put together in a report, and we asked Guidehouse to identify gaps and also to make some recommendations. So let's jump to those recommendations.
Really quickly, I'll just, you've seen this slide, so we don't need to talk a lot more about it. Winter is the time when we are delivering heat. The gas system is delivering heat. So as I said, we've discussed this slide. We can move to the next one. The increasing interdependence of the grid, in particular on gas as a generation fuel to meet the needs in throughout the year. These are annuals, but I would say the concern really is the next slide that I want to show, and that is during the winter months, we are using all of the pipeline capacity that's available. I mean, the red numbers there, those are historical numbers. And you can see that on average over the last 5 years, we're utilizing pipeline capacity in the Pacific Northwest during the winter months at more than 90%. That means there's no room or very little room for anything to go bump in the night. And you can see a couple instances where maybe we've exceeded 100%. Just to explain that, it's, during cold weather, the pipeline systems operate more efficiently. We also have, as cold weather, you can fit more molecules in the same space. So, but the point really is that we're operating at more than 95% or 90% utilization of that pipeline capacity on average for the last 5 years. And then there is a project coming online up north of the border. It's Squamish, north of BC. It's a small LNG export facility that will come online, I think, at the end of this year, actually. And that adds 6% to the overall load. And so you can see if we were to add that 6% to all of those numbers up there historically, we're really in the soup, if you will. And there is a pipeline expansion on the West Coast system that's underway right now to match that load, but there's a couple years of mismatch. So the wood fiber LNG will come on, I think, at the end of this year, and I believe that the Enbridge expansion is slated to come on at the end of 2028, I think. So that's a couple years mismatch, but just important to understand, really, that we're just out of room on the pipeline system, and there's very little room for anything to happen. And these are mechanical systems. Sometimes stuff happens. Now, these systems operate at 4 nines of reliability, so it happens seldom, but sometimes things happen and we have no room left. So go ahead to the next slide, Crystal. I think it's yours.
And as I was saying, one of the 19 reports that Guidehouse looked at was the PNUC annual update to the Northwest Regional Forecast. So we thought we'd put in the slides that we think are really telling from the 2025 Northwest Regional Forecast. I want to be really clear that this is a projection of what could happen. This isn't predicting the future. And I know that because my parents named me Crystal Ball, everybody thinks I can predict the future, but I can't, and neither does the Northwest Regional Forecast. And believe me, if I could predict the future, I wouldn't be working in this industry. I'd be working somewhere else. But so let me be clear about also how this picture comes together, because there is some misunderstanding about it, and it's pretty simple. we ask utilities, so not just PNOC members, but utilities in the region and the Bonneville Power Administration to respond to requests for information. It's been consistent for many, many years. And what we think the value of this product is, it's tracking the trend. It's seeing the changes. And what we tried to do with this slide and in our report is show how the system is projected to change over the last few years. So in 2022, when I first joined PNOC, we were not projecting an increase in demand for electricity. But in 2023, you saw utilities responded to that request for information, and they were planning for a lot more load than they had been in 2022. And we verified that with the PNOC board. Is this what people are seeing? Yes. And then in 2024, we saw an even greater step up. So this is tracking the trend of what utilities are planning for. It's not predicting the future. It's really important to understand how it comes together. But what we've done with this slide is we have plotted the increasing peak demand in our region. So we have taken the actual peak demand for our footprint, primarily the 4 Northwest states, and we have put that on there. And what we're showing is the actual peak demand for winter and summer is greater than what we had forecasted. We need to be planning for this. This is why the region is dangerously close to not having enough electricity. This is why it's so important for these two industries to be more coordinated, to try to be moving in more perfect sync so that we can keep this energy system stable here in the Northwest, especially on those really cold days when we need a lot of energy. So that's the forecast. It is a projection of what could happen, and it is really telling people we need to plan for potential changes in the trend. So we see a lot of value in this product. We also, on the next slide, are looking at utility generating resources for 2026. Again, this comes from the response to that request for information. We have both the nameplate capacity and annual energy. We are seeing a change in our resource mix. We see for the first time on the nameplate capacity, an increase in battery storage. So we are sharing that. Then we look at what utilities are relying on for generation for 2026. We see gas is the second largest source of fuel for electricity in this region. And it continues to play an important role, especially on those times when we are needing that electricity most, when it is able to be dependable and dispatchable. So that's kind of the point of this, is to show what utilities, the utilities resource mix. Now this is low water and it has some qualifications on there, but really the story is the natural gas system is the second largest source of fuel for electricity in this region, behind that incredible hydropower system that we work so hard to preserve as well. Okay, now we can get to the next slide and Guidehouse's recommendations, the Regional Energy Symposium. The purpose of the Regional Energy Symposium, which happened in October, was really to convene utilities and regulators, state policymakers, others, to continue to build awareness about the increasing interdependence between the gas and electricity system, and to really think about solutions. We appreciate Commissioner Rendall being there. We tried to really share information and to think about what the next solutions could be based on what we had heard from Guidehouse. And when we asked, can you identify those gaps? Can you help us with recommendations? And then really the symposium was to share what the region might be able to do. Dan, anything you want to add on that symposium?
No, I thought it was, I hope those who were able to attend thought it was, I know, Dr. Blackman, you were there, Commissioner Rendall was there, a couple others who I'm probably not naming and should, but hopefully we laid the information out in a balanced fashion. That was certainly the objective, was to just sort of state the facts as we see them and bring some perspective to bear.
On the last slide, what can we be working on together? These are primarily from the Guidehouse recommendations. They really haven't, they really helped us build some idea about what we might be able to advance. Again, it's on coordinated planning. It's on having better visibility, I guess, of the system. I just had Larry Beckedahl's saying kind of pop into my head. He's only been thinking about electrons, hasn't really been thinking about molecules. And so that planning and visibility is about seeing both the electrons and the molecules. We have to build infrastructure. That's really important. It's another part of kind of tracking the trend in the Northwest Regional Forecast. Utilities are planning on an unprecedented number of new generating resources in the next 10 years. When we look back, what we see utilities being able to procure falls short on what they are planning on. And so we need to work together to build infrastructure. And then the one thing that we would like to start thinking more about is policy alignment and really approaching these reliability risks with an open mind. So that's what we're going to try to keep advancing. As Dan said earlier, that Regional Energy Symposium, it was the fourth in the actions that industry leaders identified for us to work together on. It is not the end. It's just the beginning. We have a lot of work to do together.
That's it. I think that's our next slide. Is just if we have questions, we'd love to try to answer them.
Thank you so much. Handing it to our bench for questions.
I just had one question. It's a little bit more into the specifics. Dan, as you were going through, you showed us a slide of the capacity of the pipeline system throughout the last few years in the winter. And you mentioned some of those numbers are above 100%. I've never thought about this before on the gas side, but on the electric side, there is this push for dynamic line ratings to think about the differences in flows that can flow over things at different temperatures. Is there a similar push in the pipeline industry? I recognize what you're trying to show us is it's near capacity, but is there more to squeeze out from a capacity perspective if we just think about the ratings of the pipelines?
I think that's a terrific question, Mr. Chair. And I'd just say, I think there's always efficiencies. If you think about even the hydropower system, new turbines in a hydropower system squeeze a little bit more out. Those all require investments. So there probably are opportunities like that exist. In fact, I think there's one proposal out there right now to bring some more storage to the main system, the KB pipeline expansion, which is being discussed right now with a highly efficient electric-driven compressor at the end of it. So those are the kinds of things that we would look at optimizing the system that exists today, as we also consider expanding that system to accommodate the needs that are being placed on it.
Thank you. This is Glenn Blackman again. I wondered about the extent to which electric utilities and gas utilities are planning out the addition of natural gas peaking electric generation, for the next 20 years. Our state law allows utilities to use gas for up to 20% of their annual electricity requirements, which, if you think about that in terms of those peak periods, that's really quite a lot of natural gas generation that could be used under state law. And I don't see a lot of, see that showing up that much in resource plans, but maybe I'm missing it. I just wondered if utilities are talking with the gas companies about how to take advantage of that policy choice that's available in Washington.
Thanks for the question. Perhaps maybe the best place to start is a shared understanding of what that policy choice might be, and then get people talking about what you might be able to do with that flexibility. Because I'm not aware of it really happening in a coordinated way. That's part of coordinated planning that we need to do in the future.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. And because I think that at least some in the electric industry have somewhat casually observed that, well, we should be using more natural gas, for peaking purposes, and maybe without really thinking through what it takes to do that in terms of the gas infrastructure. I mean, I also hear others in the industry who seem to operate under an assumption that Washington doesn't allow utilities to use that 20% that's stated in our law. So we're happy to help with that if we can.
Thank you, Glenn.
Yeah.
Do we have any more questions from the bench? Is there one question from a non-speaking entity before we move to public comment? Anyone not on the bench want to ask a question? Going once. Going twice. Okay. Thank you very much for the start of the future of our work. Thank you, PNUC and Northwest Gas Association. We will conclude today with public comment, and we do have one entity signed up for that. So I am going to share my screen here and show you all how that works again. Public comment. Let's take about 6 minutes for public comment. As a reminder, I don't think there's anyone on the phone, so we'll just focus on Zoom. Raise your hand using the reactions bar at the bottom of your screen and press unmute, and we would love your video on while you speak. I know we have Northwest Energy Coalition in the queue. Do we have anyone else in the queue, Peyton, for public comment? Great. Let's start with Fred at Northwest Energy Coalition. Thank you.
Well, good morning, commissioners, and thank you to Heather and for all the presenters. We really appreciate that you've done this today. It's really, really timely, and just want to start by saying that this has been gas electric interface and dependency has been a big issue for us for quite a long time. We did a big report in February of 24 after the January 24 outage, big freeze. I can put a link to that in the chat here, or at least send that around. I also want to say our general view of this is, while this is very, very serious, the very first thing to do is not to panic. We have a lot of tools at our disposal to address the crunch that we are facing and that we could face again this winter, given the potential low hydro again for the 4th year in a row. That's a possibility anyway at this point. It's not entirely predictable, but the forecasts from the Northwest River Forecast Center don't give me a lot of optimism that we'll have an average or above average hydro year. Secondly, I want to commend Avista in particular for spurring the meeting that happened here in Portland a month ago, and also to PNUC and Northwest Gas Association for putting together a very informative meeting, 300 of us in the room, My only concern was it was, we should have done it a year ago, but we did it, and I really appreciate that. We want to applaud the new focus and effort on the gas electric coordination. Couldn't agree more with Crystal Ball about the urgency of that. We also have to recognize, I don't think this has come up today, there's a kind of fundamental hard limit on the gas side and a soft limit on the electric side that we have to consider that we came right up against in January of 24. The hard limit on the gas side is critical pressure, both in the pipelines and in local distribution. If you go below the critical pressure, bad things happen. If the distribution level, if pressure goes down too far, every single premise has to be checked and relit. Every single premise. A number of utilities have experienced this to a smaller degree in recent years. The largest one, I think, was Avista, had about 35,000 customers that went out. It takes a week to bring that many customers back. We cannot afford to have Seattle and the Puget Sound region have gas pressure go below critical level, or any part of our region. So that means that when gas is really in tight supply, there's higher risk on the electric side, where the soft limit is the potential need for rotating outages. So all this occurring in weather like we had in January of 24, with very, very low temperatures, real life situation, it's a very, very sobering thing to think about. The winter resource adequacy risk we have that we have talked about extensively, there are three big drivers to that. The first is hydro deficit. We have another potential occurrence of that this fall and in winter. The second is gas deliverability, as we saw in January of 24, both with what happened at Jackson Prairie and also Alberta side pipeline compressor problem that caused big trouble for Avista. And the third big issue is the demand surge that happens in very cold and then in summer, very hot weather that goes beyond our historical record. The demand that we didn't expect that shows up because people just have to turn on the heat. Finally, we've talked about future pressure from large loads, including data centers, that will put more pressure on our dependence on gas at the margin. So what can be done? First, the gas electric coordination that's been discussed here. Secondly, to accelerate customer energy resources to reduce winter peak directly. This is both on the electric and gas side. So more energy efficiency, more demand response, load flexibility, more storage. Third, batteries, especially on the electric side. Portland General Electric a year ago had 20 megawatts of batteries. Now they have 500. Pacific Core mentioned their new battery. Others are considering that. That's something that can't be done this winter, but can be done fairly soon. It's very expensive, but it works. The next thing to consider is supporting the Bonneville Power Administration's current effort to both build new transmission lines and upgrade existing equipment, and to onboard new energy sources, primarily renewables at this point, through their grid access transformation process. That will not happen immediately, but over the next couple of years should bring in quite a bit more supply onto the system. We also, in our view, ought to retain the single Western power market we now have with the Western Energy Imbalance Market, and not split the West and the Northwest into two markets. And the Western Resource Adequacy Program, in our view, also, to the extent we can, should continue together as a single system, realizing that there are some structural issues to the program design that need to be addressed. I'm a member of the RAP Program Review Committee, a member of the Northwest Power and Conservation Council's Resource Adequacy Advisory Committee, and the WEC Reliability Assessment Committee and Member Advisory Committee. So I make these comments with due respect to having some insight into those issues. Finally, on the question of new gas, which is being proposed as a kind of a panacea, the problems there are, we should consider that along with any other resource going forward, but I think we have to be aware of some of the constraints. First, the pipeline capacity in the region is pretty much tapped out. Building a new pipeline would take 4 to 8 years and cost billions of dollars. We would be competing with gas demand with LNG, especially LNG from the north coast of British Columbia, and in the Rockies with the demand from the Gulf of Mexico LNG export. And turbine availability and price is also a big factor. Meaning even getting new peaker plants is probably a 3+ year effort, and the prices have gone up by 50 to 100%. And finally, the cost of new gas, or gas broadly speaking, is going to go up because of LNG. So these are all factors that we think should be considered before considering a kind of rush to gas. Gas is a resource we should consider, but it is not the automatic pick. We have lots of other options. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much. I will not, given my time, bother with sharing slides to show the closing logistics for our meeting today. I'll just summarize by saying we are really grateful for everyone that's here and putting this together. We have not made a plan for 2026 yet. We will post our plan for our meetings in 2026 in spring 2026 sometimes, at some point. And then in the slide deck, in the docket, and on the website, there'll be directions about how to leave further comments. We would love to hear from you in the meantime, though we can't promise we'll take action on what you post in the docket. We would love to hear your thoughts, and there will be directions on how to do that in the slides. And with that, I will hand it to our bench for some closing remarks.
I'll start really quickly. I'm going to come back to the Game of Thrones quote that we heard earlier today. And it's the classic one for this meeting. In fact, it's the reason we're here. It's winter's coming. That's why we're here. But I thought of a different quote, also from Game of Thrones, also about winter. When the snows fly and the white wind blows, it's the lone wolf that dies, but the pack survives. And I think it's an important one to think about, of the coordination and the collaboration that is needed for us to work through the issues that were identified here today. I think every single presenter talked about the importance of coordination. And if the depiction of maps in the presentations today is any indication of our ability to coordinate, I think I'm an optimist, because we had the same map in like 12 of the presentations. But clearly we need more of it in this work that we're doing between these two systems. I think of our own journey on integrated systems plans and the rules we just put out, and how important that is, and how critical that is for one of our utilities, but it's just a piece of this much bigger puzzle. And as I've told Crystal before, I love a good analogy, and I particularly love an analogy that's both literal and metaphorical in the loads that we need to carry and the loads that utilities need to serve, as well as just the loads that we need to carry together, and the analogy that's used there. So I greatly appreciate also hearing from a lot of folks who aren't normally here before us. Obviously, we're the UTC, and we have commerce here in our own coordination function here. But to hear from organizations like WEC, NERC, BPA, City Light, PNUC, and the Northwest Gas Association, to bring these perspectives all together has just been a really great information sharing perspective. And I hope that continues on this journey of coordination now that we have that kind of information all at one table. Obviously, we have a lot of work to do. That to me is the key message that comes out of this, whether that be in infrastructure building, whether that be in optimizing the systems that we have, whether that be in getting our forecasts better. I think that's the base root of all of this. And I think we're in a more challenged situation on forecasts than we've probably ever been before. So I'll end with my final coordination. Thanks to our Chief Coordinating Officer, Heather, for putting this together, and Commerce, and the work that we do behind the scenes, and that everybody has done behind the scenes to make this so successful. Thanks to Glenn and Austin from Commerce for our coordination here as well. So I'll leave it at that. Turn it over to Commissioner Rendell.
Since we're running short of time, thank you everyone for being here, those from far and near and online and in the room. And it is this kind of conversation that we need to continue, just like the work that PNUC is doing. But bringing the gas and electric side together to talk about where the issues are. I will repeat what I said at the forum in Portland, that we need to build. And that's quoting then FERC Chairman Rosner. And we need to build stuff, which we have not done in this region, and which is creating part of that problem. There's other issues going on, but it's building both electric capacity and gas capacity. We need to build it so we can serve the customers and the demand that's there, whether it's from data centers or transportation, building electrification, or onshoring industry. We need to build so we can make sure this economy keeps running.
Just real quickly, thank you to everybody. What a great session. Thank you, Heather and the whole team. What we talk about here, what Crystal I think talked about, quote unquote, policy alignment, right? That's a big one. Okay. In the meantime, we implement the policy, that we have, and we'll do that to the best of our ability, given all these factors. And it's so important that we have these sorts of meetings to understand how we can continue to balance all the interests that are out there under the current policy. I just throw that out there because it's realism. All right. So thank you. Thank you so much again.
And I'll add my thanks on behalf of the Department of Commerce, both to the presenters today and to the UTC for hosting us, and to the staffs of the two agencies for pulling this all together, and for the work ahead to summarize this so that we can send it all to the legislature and the governor. So thanks for a very informative morning.
Thank you. We are adjourned.